Chapter 1354. When Brother Ju and Ruo Yu exited Wang Qiong's room, it was already dawn. After a few hours of discussion, the partnership between them and Wang Qiong was finally confirmed. Of the many NPC factions in this scenario, Wang Qiong was definitely not the strongest in terms of fighting power, but in terms of intelligence, no one could compare to him. This kind of character was the type that Feng Bujue was most willing to cooperate with. Through the negotiation with Wang Qiong, Brother Ju's side quest, Investigate the Murder at Mi Mayin, had been successfully completed. Even though before retrieving Jing's head, Feng Bujue had managed to get some information out of him, the information that he obtained then was not enough to complete the mission. This was because Jing was not someone who was afraid of death. Even when his head was removed, Jing had only revealed some basic information about the scenario. That kind of information could be obtained from any disciple from a second-rate faction. Thankfully, Jing had a stack of banknotes from Wang Qiong's bank. It was through these banknotes that Feng Bujue found Wang Qiong. After chatting with Wang Qiong, the mystery about Mi Mayin was solved. Speaking of which, this Jing was quite unlucky. The previous afternoon, after a tough battle, he finally managed to kill and disguise himself as Daoist Cotton. After completing the disguise, Jing took the banknotes given to him by Wang Qiong and left the town. He planned to meet up with his partner at a certain location outside the town. To his surprise, he had just left Linlu town when he ran into Feng Bujue and Ruo Yu. Brother Ju noticed that this guy's data was much stronger than a normal NPC, so he went forward to negotiate with him. The result of the negotiation, for the two players, it was quite good. Now that he had successfully formed an alliance with Wang Qiong, Feng Bujue had a good grasp of the information in this scenario. In his mind, he had already started a plan for the night. However, what he didn't expect was that his action of killing Mirror had caused the original plot to change drastically. At the same time, outside Linlu town, in the middle of the wild forest, there was a person kneeling on a huge rock. It was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s with an unshaven beard. He was wearing a bamboo hat and thick but ragged clothes of coarse cloth. Beside his hand was a rod-like object wrapped in cloth. Although it was wrapped in cloth, anyone who looked at it would feel that it was a weapon. It's dawn. Suddenly, a voice came from behind the man. It was a woman's voice. She and her companion had been standing beside a tree not far from the middle-aged man, resting quietly. Both of them were players. Their IDs were Oda AI and Sasaki. I know. A moment later, the middle-aged man replied unhurriedly. Kagami didn't come, Oda AI added. Yes, he didn't come, the middle-aged man said. Yesterday, you said that he'd be arriving at dusk at the latest. In the end, we waited for him all night in vain, Oda AI said. What are you trying to say? The middle-aged man asked. What she wants to say is there are only two possibilities right now. Before Oda AI could respond, Sasaki, who was next to her, said in his sickly and weak voice, First, Kagami ran away with the money. Second, he did not continue because he could feel that when he said the word second, the aura of the middle-aged man on the rock changed. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man spoke again. It's not that easy to kill Jing. I don't think so. Oda AI heard this and sneered. It might be difficult for the guys in town, but for me, I can take his life within 10 moves. Then do you think? The middle-aged man continued. Those outlanders who are similar to you can do it too. It's hard to say if they can kill him within 10 moves like Oda AI. Sasaki replied. But if they simply pursue the result of killing, it won't be too difficult for them. As he spoke, his eyes were fixed on the middle-aged man's back. As long as they have the heart, even if it's against you, it's not impossible. I see. After listening to Sasaki's words, the middle-aged man was calm, as usual. With that, he picked up the rod-like object wrapped in coarse cloth and stood up from the rock. If that's the case, after the middle-aged man stood still, he raised his hand and pulled the brim of his bamboo hat. Then there's no need to wait any longer. As soon as he said this, Oda AI's expression changed. What do you mean? You want to enter the town? Yes. The middle-aged man gave an affirmative response. Hey, this is different from what we agreed on. Oda AI obviously had some objections to the middle-aged man's decision. For you, it's not much of a difference, is it? The middle-aged man did not have much of a reaction. His tone was still calm. It's just that the time is a little earlier. This, Oda AI was still hesitating. Don't worry, the middle-aged man continued. I'm a man of my word. The deal between us remains unchanged. After we joined forces to kill those Wulian people and the so-called Outlanders. As he spoke, he took out a bamboo scroll from his arms and held it flat beside him. This is the sword dance of the grass. I'll naturally give it to you with both hands. When the two players from Sengoku saw the item, their eyes changed a little, but they did not have any unusual movements. Of course, you can also choose to draw your sword on me now. After pausing for a few seconds, the middle-aged man said again, as long as you can kill me, this thing will naturally belong to you. Of course, they would not draw their sword if Oda AI and Sasaki wanted to sneak up on this man. They would have done it long ago. The reason why they stood less than 5 meters behind him and did not make a move all night was because they did not feel confident. In their opinion, the difficulty of joining forces with this NPC to kill other players and NPCs was far lower than the difficulty of the two of them challenging this NPC. In fact, this was indeed the right choice. Objectively speaking, this middle-aged man who held the sword dance of the grass was very strong. His combat power was at least in the top 3 of this Wulian world. Of course, this list only included those who were still alive, not those who were no longer alive. In terms of one-on-one martial arts, Jing, Shui, and Yu, these 3 people were at the top level of the current Wulian world. They were even stronger than experts like Duan Kai, Daoist Cotton, and Xie Xiuan. However, compared to this man, they were still far from being able to compare. Even they would admit this point because Kyoka, Shui, and Yu is this man's disciple. Chapter 1355. New Year's Eve noon. There was no one on the streets of Linlu town. Even the commoners knew that they shouldn't go out today. They tactfully closed their doors, watched over their children, and tied up the animals in their courtyards, praying that the new year would pass quickly and peacefully. The merchants that usually came to town didn't show up today either. After all, it was New Year's Eve. To Chinese, if you could only rest for one day in a year, this would be it. Of course, not everyone found a place to hide. Aside from the various martial artists, the drunkards, ruffians, and scoundrels in the town also gathered in the dark alleys and street corners out of curiosity. They were a little tipsy, so they gathered there. After all, this was a rare opportunity. They also wanted to see what kind of show these heroes of the martial arts world would put on. Master, we've checked both the front and back. Only the beggar clan has more people than us. The other clans have at most 10 people, but the man hesitated halfway through his sentence. But what? 2G asked coldly. It's just that, although their numbers are small, more than half of them are strong. This wild tiger gang spy's martial arts were average, and only his Qin Gong was outstanding. However, he had the ability to distinguish which people were the true experts, and this ability caused him to feel rather uneasy. What's wrong? 2G saw through his thoughts and cast a cold glance at him. Are you afraid? His gaze caused the scout's entire body to tremble and his heart to stop beating. At this moment, only the 2 of them were standing in the courtyard. The other members of the Wild Tiger Gang were lying in ambush in the nearby area. In other words, if 2G was unhappy and decided to execute the spy on the spot, no one would care about it. I deserve to die. The spy knew that his thoughts couldn't escape 2G's eyes. Instead of quibbling, it was better to admit his mistake. 2G laughed. In comparison, are you more afraid of them or of me? This question was difficult to answer. It seemed that either answer was wrong. Therefore, the spy didn't dare to answer. He just stood there and was so anxious that he broke out in cold sweat. Actually, the answer to this question is not important. A moment later, 2G looked at his subordinate and revealed a satisfied expression. Actually, I'm the same as you. I'm scared too. He paused and said calmly, I'm afraid of death. I'm afraid of losing, and I'm also afraid that I won't be able to get the sword dance herbarium tonight." Hearing this, the fear on the spy's face faded a little, replaced by a trace of doubt. It's right to be afraid. Fear can keep you away from danger. 2G continued, but you cannot lose your cool, your sense of propriety, or even your stance just because you are afraid. When he said the last two words, he purposely emphasized them. Remember, the more afraid you are, the clearer you have to know what you should do and do it well. Understood? Large beads of sweat rolled down the spy's face. He looked at 2G with a grateful expression and bowed. "Thank you for your teachings, sect leader." Go ahead," 2G said and turned around. He waved his hand and signaled for the man to go out and investigate. When the spy received the order, he immediately used his qing gong and left the courtyard in the blink of an eye. 2G, on the other hand, was still standing there, deep in thought. From the outside, the sect leader of the Wild Tiger Gang looked like a rough person. But in reality, this person was as sly as a fox, as cruel as a wolf, as poisonous as a snake, as fierce as a tiger. His dressing, his appearance, even the name of his gang and the name of his unique martial arts were all his deliberate disguises. He wanted others to think that he was a rough person, a martial artist, so that they would look down on him and let down their guard. Objectively speaking, he was very successful. Duan Kui's death was a good proof of this. In reality, it was not only Duan Kui. Last night, there were 10 experts who were ambushed by the Wild Tiger Gang, and none of them survived. As for how many of those experts' disciples died, no one would bother to count. This success rate was not a coincidence. It was because the targets 2G chose were all targets that he was confident in. Before he took action, not only did he investigate these people's martial arts, age, and physical condition, he even investigated their habits, hobbies, and special quirks. As for those he could not investigate clearly, such as Wang Qiong, who was more thorough than 2G, Lung Yuqiu, Daoist Cotton, who did not belong to any sect and was a lone wolf, he would not act rashly. This was 2G's principle of doing things. First, he could not win, then he would wait for the enemy to win. However, such a strategy would not work today. At least, with the Wild Tiger Gang's strength, they could not make an undefeatable arrangement. Therefore, just as 2G said, he was very afraid. But today's situation was worth him worrying about. It was also worth him giving up the part of his intelligence that he could not control to the so-called destiny and luck to gamble. Creak! The sound of the door turning interrupted 2G's train of thought. He was somewhat surprised and turned around to look at the wooden door that was a few meters away from him. It was the door of a private house. Even though 2G treated the house as his base, he did not get the permission from the owner. Of course, he did not think the owner of the house would have the guts to open the door and argue with him. However, at that moment, the door to the residence was opened. Furthermore, the two people who walked out did not seem to be ordinary citizens at all. Looking at the child Jian and not a scaredy cat who were walking toward him, 2G revealed a self-deprecating smile. "I was careless," he mumbled to himself. "Even if I couldn't sense any inner energy, I should have gone in to take a look." When 2G came here this morning, he did consider barging into the house and killing the occupants. However, he was afraid that things would get out of hand. Therefore, he only used his inner energy to check the situation outside the house. After confirming that there were only 2 people in the house and that there was no reaction from his inner energy, he concluded that there were only 2 commoners in the house. If I remember correctly, as he spoke, 2G was ready to fight, but he did not show it on his face. He looked at the child Jian and said, "This should be young hero Huangfu." Then, he turned to look at Not a Scaredy Cat. "And this is Heroine Chai." 2G had already bribed the shopkeeper of the Kulai Pavilion, so he knew everything about the inn like the back of his hand. With 2G's intelligence, it wasn't difficult for him to remember every guest's name. "Gang Leader 2, you sure are well informed," Not a Scaredy Cat said. "This is the first time we've met, but you seem to know us well." She reacted quickly. Almost immediately, she remembered how 2G found out about her and Child Jian's names, so she tried to test him. "Humph, I'm just well informed," 2G replied with a cold smile. But you two are very capable. He paused for a second and continued. Let's not talk about the two of you being able to escape unscathed from Long Yucho yesterday. Let's not talk about the fact that you can hide your inner strength. What I'm most curious about is, how did you manage to ambush in this room? This question confused 2G. After all, he had only decided to use this house as his base of operations that morning. If he wanted to set up an ambush beforehand, he would have to be a prophet. There is no such thing as an ambush. Blade Runner replied in a relaxed tone. We predicted that things would not be peaceful last night, so we decided to leave the inn and find another place to hide so that we would not be dragged into any unnecessary trouble. So, we found this random house to hide in. He shrugged. The family received some money. The money they extorted from Long Yuchio was enough for this family to live for a year, and happily left the town. They planned to go to the mistress's family and stay there for 10 days to half a month before coming back. What he said was half true. Avoiding getting dragged into trouble was only one of the reasons they were there. Actually, their main goal was to ambush Sashimi and Meng Jingshan, these two from Jiang who were not easy to deal with. When they entered the town, they naturally noticed the presence of the two members of Regulation and the Sound Shells. But Su Huaishang's skill of invisibility in the Sound Shells was something that Child Jian and Not a Scaredy Cat could not do. Therefore, the plan they came up with was to wait for the enemy to arrive. The two would pretend that they did not know they were being watched and would eat, drink, and rest. At the same time, they would chat with various NPCs in town to gather information. It was as if they were playing a single-player RPG game. At night, they even found a house to hide in like everything was going well. All of this was to create the illusion that we don't know that we are being watched for the watchers. But in reality, they were constantly on guard against the enemy's movement and were prepared to counterattack when the enemy came. Who would have thought that at night, Sashimi would be killed by Su Huaishang? The Sound Shells were the special items that Sashimi created using his skill, and they disappeared with his death. Child Jian and Not a Scaredy Cat, who noticed this, did not dare act rashly. If the two were outside the town, they would have nothing to worry about. After they noticed the disappearance of the Sound Shells, they could enter the town without fear. But they had entered the town during the day. This meant that before the Sound Shells disappeared, their location was still within the enemy's grasp. Therefore, they had to consider the possibility that the enemy had purposely made the Sound Shells disappear to create the illusion that the surveillance had disappeared. That way, they would be exposed. With that thought in mind, it was not easy for them to move. They could only continue to wait. They waited until morning, but instead of Sashimi and Meng Jingshan, they saw the Mad Tiger gang that came to scout the place. Who would have thought that 2G would choose this courtyard as his hiding place and meeting point? His gang members were also waiting for orders with this place as their center. At this point, Child Jian and Not a Scaredy Cat decided not to come out. With their hearing, they could hear every word that 2G said inside the house. Through the communication between 2G and the other scouts, they could grasp the situation in the town and observe how it would develop. Oh, 2G did not buy Child Jian's explanation. Then, based on what you've said, your appearance in this house is just a coincidence. Whether it is a coincidence or not is no longer important, Not a Scaredy Cat said. Then what is important? 2G did not beat around the bush and asked directly. That we came out is very important, Blade Runner said. 2G thought about it and realized that the man had a point. He could not help but wonder, why would they voluntarily come out? If they wanted to eavesdrop, they would have stayed inside the house. If they wanted to ambush us, they would not have opened the door so openly. That means 2G's mind was very sharp. Something happened that forced you to come out. That's right, Blade Runner said. Can you tell me the reason? 2G asked. Of course. Child Jian did not mind telling the man the reason they left the house because even if he did not, the man would soon find out. Someone has entered the town, Child Jian said after exchanging a look with Not a Scaredy Cat. What kind of person? 2G asked. I don't know his name, Child Jian replied. Then, you should know something else, 2G said. Ah, Child Jian's expression froze, and he said seriously, what I know is his kung fu is very high, so high that it is beyond your imagination. He paused for a moment before adding, also, he has the sword dance grass record on him. Chapter 1356. It was noon, and the sky was overcast. The gray clouds blocked out the sun, and even the heavens seemed to be helping to create the atmosphere of an impending storm. At that moment, 3 figures appeared on the empty street. The one in the middle was a middle-aged man. He was dressed in rags, and in his hand was a stick-like weapon wrapped in rags. Step by step, he walked at a leisurely pace. The 2 people who followed behind him were much more eye-catching than him. Oda AI and Sasaki Akira were players after all. Their appearance and presence were very different from the normal characters in the scenario. Even though the system had adjusted their appearance to a certain extent, they were still very eye-catching. The 3 of them walked on the widest main street in the middle of Linlu town. Walking in the silent, cold wind, they walked under the gazes of countless people who were hiding in the dark. Whoosh. Suddenly, there was the sound of wind breaking. It cut through the air and also cut through the suffocating atmosphere. Ping! Oda AI was quick to react. She raised one hand and used her wrist guard to easily deflect the flying projectile. But this was just the beginning. Before the first projectile hit the ground, the follow-up attack came. In the blink of an eye, the 3 of them were surrounded by black dots that rained down from all directions. There were darts, knives, needles, bullets. Every type of hidden weapon had its own unique speed, strength, and killing method. Needless to say, some of the hidden weapons were even infused with gunpowder and would explode the moment they were parried. Some of the hidden weapons would split into 2 or more as they traveled. There were even things that could suddenly change their flight path. Facing such a siege in a place with no cover, generally speaking, the only way to escape was to jump into the air. However, the 3 people stood where they were. 6 sword. At that moment, Sasaki Akira made his move. When he called out the name of the skill, he was also in a sickly state. Yuan Sha. The moment he said that, the sword appeared. In the next second, a transparent circular force field spread out with Sasaki Akira as the center, enveloping Oda AI and the middle-aged man on the side. It was unknown what the principle behind his sickness sword, circular stop, was. His sword was clearly still in its sheath, but it was able to create a saturated sword energy force field that blocked all the hidden weapons outside of that circle. After this round of joint attacks, the 3 of them were actually completely unharmed. Unexpectedly, a few seconds later, another change occurred. Then, a person flew out a window on the 2nd floor of a building by the roadside. As soon as this person landed on the ground, more screams and the sound of weapons clashing could be heard. So it's time for the dogs to bite each other. Oda AI looked at the figures flying out of the buildings and dark alleys. She already knew what was happening in places that she couldn't see. Her conjecture was indeed correct. The current situation was a case of black on black. The group that took the lead to attack them was from the Windhoof Society. This sect, to put it bluntly, was an armed gang of thieves. The people in the gang were all good at hidden weapons and lightness skills. In terms of fair duels in broad daylight, they were not very strong, but in terms of assassination, ambush, and theft, their skills were not bad. Last night, the number of martial artists killed by the Windhoof Society was much more than the Wild Tiger Gang. Of course, they killed basically all the small fries. They didn't kill many real masters. Compared to the scheming and astute 2G, the head of the Windshield Association was a bit more simple-minded. So much so that after that night of assassination, they had also suffered heavy losses. At noon today, they had a total of 30 people left. With such strength, it was obviously difficult to deal with the sword dance of the grass. Thus, the Windhoof Society thought of a simple and direct strategy that was very likely to work. Strike first and gain the upper hand. They purposely chose an area not far from the town entrance to set up an ambush. Their plan was to be the first to strike and take away the people who were carrying the secret manual in one wave. Then, they would use their own sex advantage in terms of lightness skills to take the things and quickly run away. But they did not expect that the attack they had been preparing for a long time and was certain to succeed would be easily neutralized by their target. Not only that, Beggar's Sect, Ocean Dragon Sect, and White Plum Cult were the three sects that suffered the most from their ambush last night. They had already set up ambushes at the periphery. When the Window Society made their move, the people from the other three sects came and surrounded them like dumplings. The fight ended very quickly. Rather than a fight, it was more like a massacre. 140 people killed 30 people. Moreover, it was a surprise attack. The latter could hold on for 1 or 2 minutes was already not bad. After all the members of the Windshield Association were all lying flat on the ground, a black mass of people appeared from all over the streets and alleys, blocking the path of the three people. They were led by 3 people as well. The first person was a man with gray hair that reached his shoulders. He wore a light-colored martial arts suit. Looking at his appearance, he was at least 60 years old, but his movements did not show any signs of old age. This person was called Luo Qin, the current leader of the Beggar's Sect. As a sect with a long history, the Beggar's Sect had produced many outstanding heroes. Unfortunately, no matter if it was talent, martial arts, or wisdom, Luo Qin was the kind that could not be ranked. If there was anything worth praising about him, it would be he had collected some incomplete martial arts from various places and successfully restored the lost martial arts of the Beggar's Sect, the 18 dragon subduing palms that had been lost for decades. If it was 100 years ago, this would not be a big deal. At that time, there were many martial arts of a higher level than the 18 dragons subduing palms. But in this martial arts era, with this set of palm techniques, Luo Qin could be ranked as one of the top masters in the world. As for the second person, this person's name was Gu Jiaolong. His clothes were ordinary, like those of a martial artist, but his appearance was very special. It could be said that he had the back of a tiger, the waist of a bear, and the features of a delicate face. Yes, you did not see wrong, and I did not write wrong. He looked like that. Therefore, this young leader of the Ocean Dragon Sect had the nickname Jade-Faced Flood Dragon. The Ocean Dragon Sect, as the name suggests, relied on the sea to make a living. It was half martial arts and half business. Different from other sects, the Ocean Dragon Sect had a good relationship with the government. This was because they would regularly provide some of the court officials and local officials with rare treasures and delicacies from the sea. Therefore, they obtained a lot of convenience. In the coastal area of Jiangnan, the Ocean Dragon Sect could be said to be the dominant force. It was not an exaggeration to say that as long as it was within their sphere of influence, the illegal salt business could be done openly. As for the martial arts of this sect, they were average. They did not have any superior martial arts, but the sect had a few fierce martial arts that could be considered passable in actual combat. Finally, there was the third person. It was a woman who was so fat that it was difficult to distinguish her gender. Perhaps it was not strange now, but in that agricultural society, where material was relatively poor, it was quite rare to see a fat person who weighed 100 or 200 pounds. This female sect leader, or should I say, the female sect leader, was called Feng Meiyu. This name was given by herself when she grew up. When she was young, she did not have a name. It could be said that she had many names. Perhaps no one would believe it, but this Feng sect leader, when she was 15 years old, was the top hostess of a very famous brothel in the capital. At that time, her name was Feng. At that time, Feng was a beauty. Even though she was only a young girl, her precocious body had already conquered countless young masters in the capital. Because she was a child picked up by the brothel's madam, she grew up in that kind of environment. Therefore, she did not seem to reject selling her body to live a good life. But one day she changed. A woman's change was usually related to a man, and Feng was no exception. When she was 19 years old, she fell in love with a young master who came from a poor family. She loved his appearance, she loved his talent, and she loved every minute and every second that she spent with him. Even after many years, she still remembered that warmth. However, this relationship soon ended with the young master's untimely death. His death was not an accident. It was only because he was too close to Feng, and the latter had the idea of redeeming herself. This was obviously something that some people did not want to see. And those some people were all people who could do anything in the capital. For them, killing a poor scholar was no different from killing an ant. From that time on, although Foner did not show any abnormalities on the surface, in fact, her heart was completely consumed by the flames of revenge. She used her own methods to obtain some secret martial arts manuals and practice them in secret. Hatred was a terrible motivation, and it would not weaken with the passage of time. Instead, it would become stronger and stronger. Under such motivation, no matter what a person did, it would be extremely efficient. 3 years later, Foner completed her vengeance. She only spent one night to kill all of her enemies and burned down the biggest brothel in the capital. She also skinned the procuress and hung her corpse on the memorial arch of the Flower Street. After that night, Foner disappeared. More than 10 years later, a sect called White Plum Sect appeared in Jianghu. Their sect leader was an extremely fat woman who called herself Feng Meiyu. Her obesity was not because she was lazy and gluttonous. It was because she lacked the most basic knowledge and skills. She relied on her own understanding and desperately practiced many different types of internal strength. In the end, it caused her meridians and chi to become abnormal. After a few years, these abnormalities gradually appeared on her body. Her obesity was the most direct manifestation. She had many other problems on her body, and they were all tormenting her. However, in the past 10 years, even though she had visited many famous doctors and consulted many masters of the martial arts world, no one could cure her extreme symptoms of chi deviation. Finally, the pain in her body caused her mental problems. She gave up on treatment and turned the pain into a new motivation. She turned killing into a way to release her stress and turned her desire for power into her own painkiller. Just like that, the White Plum Sect was born. Beggar's Sect, Ocean Dragon Sect, White Plum Sect. When the three people and the gang members stood still, the middle-aged man slowly opened his mouth. "Look at this situation. Are you all working together?" He guessed right. Due to the various things that happened last night, the strength of each sect had changed. After the three sects negotiated, they decided to work together to ensure the victory today. Don't talk nonsense. Gu Jiaolong was 32 years old this year. He was at the age where he was hot-blooded. Usually, he was the boss in his own sect's territory, and he had already formed a habit. Therefore, his words could not be described as hot-blooded anymore, but rather tyrannical. "Hand over this sword dance of the grass, and I'll spare your life." "Oh." The middle-aged man heard him, but his tone was still calm. "How do you know that the sword dance of the grass is with me?" Before Gu Jiaolong could answer, Luo Qing continued. "The murderer who killed 63 members of the Jiang family will appear in Linlu town on New Year's Eve with the sword dance of the grass. He is about 50 years old, with a bamboo hat covering his face and holding a weapon wrapped in rags." He repeated the information that had already spread throughout the Jianghu word for word. Then he continued, "Now, except for the fact that it is not night yet, you completely fit the description of this information." He paused for a moment and moved his gaze to Sasaki Akira. "Furthermore, we saw the kung fu of your subordinate just now. That must be the move from the sword dance of the grass, right?" Their speculation was reasonable. Sasaki Akira's skill was miraculous in the eyes of a traditional martial artist, and it could be explained by he learned it from the sword dance of the grass. You have a point there, but there is something that I am not sure if you have thought about." The middle-aged man replied calmly. "The information that you mentioned seems to be a bit too accurate, isn't it?" When he said that, the two players behind him did not react because they had already heard the whole story from the middle-aged man. However, Su Huaishang, Blade Runner, and Not a Scaredy Cat, who were hiding in the dark, heard what the middle-aged man said, and their expressions changed. "So what?" Feng Meiyu stood there like a meatball. It was difficult for her to even speak. "Now that things have come to this, what is the point of saying all this? Are you trying to deny that the thing is with you?" "I am not trying to deny anything," the middle-aged man replied. "Instead, I'm trying to admit something. Aren't you trying to say that you are the one who leaked the information?" Suddenly, another person's voice joined the conversation. The crowd turned to the source of the voice, and they soon saw a person standing on the roof of a residential building. Feng Bujue. The moment Brother Ju appeared, the name was like a bullet that passed through the hearts of the other players. The middle-aged man's attention was also attracted by Brother Ju. He raised his head and used his finger to push up the brim of his bamboo hat. He glanced at Brother Ju. Be careful. Oda AI's whisper entered the middle-aged man's ears. This kid is hard to deal with. Hey, who do you think you are? 2 seconds later, Gu Jiaolong shouted at Brother Ju. Do you have a right to speak here? Feng Bujue chuckled and replied. Young Master Gu, please calm down. I'm only here to say a few things that might be of interest to all of you. I have no intention of interfering with all of you. We don't have time to listen to your story. Luokan said, I advise you to hurry. Wait. Unexpectedly, the middle-aged man interrupted. I would like to hear what he has to say. The moment he said this, the 3 leaders were stunned. The way they looked at Brother Ju changed subtly. Of course, at this moment, they still didn't take this young face seriously. They were just wondering what the middle-aged man was planning. Actually, I don't have much to say. I can finish it in a short while. Seeing that no one was interrupting him, Feng Bujue continued. To put it simply, today's situation was planned by you. He looked at the middle-aged man and smiled. If I'm not mistaken, you should be the Japanese Ronin who didn't know the true value of the sword manual and pawned it at a low price at a pawn shop. As he finished speaking, other than the middle-aged man, Oda AI, and Sasaki Akira, everyone else's expression changed. Feng Bujue didn't care and continued. Actually, you knew the value of the sword dance Kusanagi very well. That's why you used it as bait to set up this trap. He paused for a second and continued. First, you purposely let Jiang-san get the sword dance Kusanagi. Then, you created the massacre at the Jiang Castle and took the sword manual back. You knew that Duan Koi would definitely come to avenge his disciple and investigate this matter to the end. Therefore, you used the name of the Diansong faction to spread the news of the sword dance Kusanagi. When people heard the news, they would naturally think that this was something that the Diansong faction found out, as if everything was logical. But when I heard about this, I felt that something was wrong. Let's not talk about how sect leader Duan and his disciples came to the conclusion that the murderer killed the whole family to steal the sword manual from a murder scene where there were no living people. Even if they believed that the murderer's motive was to steal something important and continued to investigate with this as a clue. The possibility of finding the so-called Japanese Ronin and pawn shop was very slim. After that, the news that the sword dance Kusanagi would appear on New Year's Eve made me completely certain. The murderer himself was the one who spread the news. Just like what you said, the description of the news was very specific and precise. Not only the time and place, but even your outfit was described perfectly. At this point, Brother Ju could not help but laugh out loud. The most ridiculous thing is that since this news has spread all over the martial arts world and attracted so many sects and people, then the person in the news must have known about this. Under such circumstances, why would he appear at the time and place mentioned in the news? He knew that the whole martial arts world was ambushing him, so why would he still come to die? His question was obviously thrown at the few sect leaders and the other martial artists who were lurking around. So, there's only one truth. Feng Bujue raised his hand and pointed at the middle-aged man. The person with the sword dance Kusanagi, the person who spread the news, the person who created this situation through many calculations, doesn't think that he will die. As he spoke, he turned around and looked at the 3 sect leaders. The ones who will die are you. Chapter 1357. Before Brother Bujue could finish speaking, Gu Jiaolong laughed loudly. I thought you had some brilliant idea, but in the end, you just said such nonsense. As he spoke, he took a few steps forward and stared at Feng Bujue. He pointed at the middle-aged man in front of him. Based on what you said, with just 3 people, they want to fight against the entire Chinese world of martial artists. It's not just 3 people, the middle-aged man said. Originally, there were 5 people. When When Feng Bujue heard this, he laughed maliciously. Now there are still 5 people. Oh. The middle-aged man seemed to have heard something from his words, and his expression changed slightly. I believe that you should know that Jing is already dead, Feng Bujue said. I know, the middle-aged man said. But what you still don't know is that Flower's quest has also failed, Feng Bujue said. This news caused the middle-aged man's expression to become unprecedentedly dark. That's impossible, he answered. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not, Feng Bujue said. In any case, you are destined to die here today. I don't think you have the time to care about other people. The middle-aged man fell silent, but he did not stay silent for long. Since you were able to see through my plan, when he spoke again, his voice had become very cold, and killing intent had already spread out from his body. You should understand that even if I'm alone, I still have a 90% chance of succeeding in today's situation. Your original chances have nothing to do with me. Feng Bujue looked fearless and relaxed. You just need to remember, since I'm here now, you don't even have a 10% chance. His words were a little arrogant. At the very least, to the middle-aged man, he was overestimating himself. But the players around him did not feel that way, because the person who said those words was Feng Bujue. No one would ever know whether he was bluffing or telling the truth. To him, the line between impossible and possible was very blurry. Are you done chatting? Gu Jiaolong, who didn't understand what the two of them were talking about, spoke up again. This Ocean Dragon Gate's boss hated being ignored. What 5 or 10 people? You. The moment the word you left his mouth, he reached for his waist and quickly pulled out the knife. The tip of the knife was pointed at the middle-aged man's nose. Faced with this sudden attack, the middle-aged man did not move at all. In the end, the saber did not touch him. With Gu Jiaolong's arm span and the length of the blade, the tip of the blade was just 2 centimeters away from the middle-aged man's face. I don't care who you are, and I don't care what you're planning. Gu Jiaolong pointed his saber at the other party and said loudly, This young master is also a reasonable person. I have no enmity with you in the past. As long as you hand over the sword dance scroll, I will spare you. He didn't say the last word. It wasn't that he didn't want to say it, but he couldn't. Lung Yuchio's sword was very fast as lightning. When his sword pierced Gu Jiaolong's throat, the latter didn't even have time to react. Some people's weapons, even if they are unsheathed, are no different than if they were on the ground. Lung Yuchio retracted his sword in front of everyone's astonished eyes and said, In some people's eyes. As he spoke, he looked at Luo Can, Feng Meiyu, and the disciples of the 3 factions. Although they are open, they're no different from being blind. Lung Yuchio, Feng Meiyu immediately glared at Lung Yuchio with cold eyes and said sternly, What do you mean by this? Do you want to snatch food from our mouths? Her expression now looked very fierce. This was not because she hated the other party, but more, it was an instinct. Where did Lung Yuchio come from? How did he pull out his sword? Feng Meiyu and Luo didn't see clearly. In other words, if Lung Yuchio's target was her or Luo Can, then the two of them would most likely end up like Gu Jiaolong. Therefore, Feng Meiyu's current reaction was like a weak wild beast encountering a stronger predator. Only by baring her fangs and brandishing her claws and hoping to overwhelm her opponent with her aura would she be able to gain the upper hand. Snatch food? Ha! Lung Yuchio laughed. Don't talk about me like you people. I never said that I came to Linlu Town to snatch the sword dance sketchbook. As he spoke, he glanced at Gu Jiaolong, who had already fallen to the ground. I killed Gu Jiaolong because... He took half a step back and turned to look at the middle-aged man beside him. He offended my master. What? Not only Luo, Can, and Feng Meiyu, but all the martial artists in the open and in the dark, as well as a few players who didn't know the situation, were shocked by these words. Although they didn't know the strength of the middle-aged man, they still knew a thing or two about Lung Yuchio's strength. Even if this man's kung fu was only slightly better than Lung Yuchio's, it was hard to predict the outcome of today's battle. Sect masters, heroes, and martial artists of the Central Plains. After a while, the middle-aged man suddenly used his internal energy to send a message. Now that things have come to this, I have something to say. He only said half a sentence, but many people were already sweating. Most of these nervous, frightened, and shocked people were quasi-first-class masters in the martial arts world. It was because their kung fu had reached a certain level that they could understand how terrifying the internal energy of the person who sent the message was. I'm Hyang Shinji. When the middle-aged man said his name, everyone understood that Brother Ju wasn't lying. He was really a Japanese. Using your central plane saying, I'm the leader of the godly Jinsho sword sect. This wasn't the first time he came to the Central Plains. His mastery of the Chinese language and his understanding of China's culture was probably deeper than many people from the Central Plains. Today, I set up this trap and brought all of you here for one thing. After he finished introducing himself, Hyang Shinji continued, I've heard that the Central Plains martial arts world is full of talented people. I'm not that talented, but I'd like to use my godly Jinsho sword sect sword technique to ask for advice from all the heroes in the world. He paused for half a second. Everyone, you don't have to be polite with me. I can accept it whether you all attack me together or secretly attack me, as long as you can kill me. At this point, he took out the book that everyone in the martial arts world yearned for day and night. Then this sword dance grass notes, written by the sword saint Pei Min, should belong to you. Although Hyang Shinji's words were extremely unfavorable to him, his tone was still very calm. It was so calm that it made the scalps of those who heard it tingle. But if no one can defeat me today, he put the secret book away. Then, from today onwards, I, Hyang Shinji, will lead the Central Plains martial arts world. If anyone doesn't obey, within 7 days, I'll make his sect disappear from the world. What a joke. Hearing this, Luo couldn't help but interrupt. Let's not talk about whether you can leave this place alive. Even if your martial arts are really the best in the world, with just a few of you, do you think you can wipe out other people's sects? What you said does make sense. Hyang Shinji stopped the telepathic communication and spoke to Luo in a normal way. In a place like the Jiang clan castle, it's easy to kill a few dozen people. But for a sect like the Beggar sect that has members all over the world, even the imperial court couldn't wipe them out. I definitely can't do it either. Luo snorted coldly. A trace of pride flashed across his face. However, in the next second, Hyang Shinji changed the topic. But that doesn't matter. I can only kill the sect leader. Luo's face froze. His body instinctively started to circulate his vital energy. If killing one sect leader isn't enough, I'll kill two. Whoever becomes the sect leader, I'll kill. Whoever is around him when I kill him, I'll kill them too. Hyang Shinji continued, I think it won't be long before no one in this sect is willing to become the sect leader. Just like a snake without a head, it will soon be a dead snake. How dare you? Luo couldn't wait any longer. He roared and immediately got into a fighting stance. He wanted to gain the initiative by striking first. At this moment, it wasn't that Luo was in a hurry to make a move. It was just that Hyang Shinji and Lung Yuchio were just standing there, but they were almost overwhelming everyone with their aura. If Chief Luo still didn't make a move, the sect members behind him would probably scatter and flee. Yuchio. Hyang Shinji didn't care about Luo's actions. He calmly called out to Lung Yuchio. Master, what are your orders? Lung Yuchio could speak normally in front of her master. Hyang Shinji immediately turned to look at Feng Bujue and said, I want him alive. Understood. Lung Yuchio responded. In the blink of an eye, she leaped more than 10 meters away from where she was standing and pounced on Feng Bujue, who was on the roof by the roadside. Brother Ju was also very alert. Seeing this scene, he turned and ran. In a flash, he had leaped far away. Seeing this, Lung Yuchio couldn't help but be secretly shocked by Brother Ju's lightness skill. But since he had already accepted his master's order, he had to do his best. Therefore, he used all his martial arts and chased after Brother Ju. At the same time, Luo also made a move. The 18 Dragon Palms was the peak of external martial arts and was unparalleled in the world. Even if Luo's talent wasn't the best, he was able to recreate and master this lost martial art. His martial arts attainment was evident. Right now, Luo Qin was using all his strength, and the power of his palms was terrifying. Not to mention the 18 dragon palms. Among the martial arts masters watching the fight, there were only a few who had the confidence to take 2 or 3 of his moves. However, this palm technique is really good. Yangshin lowered his head and looked at the bleeding right arm in his hand. He commented calmly, "It's a pity. Your skills are too weak." When he finished speaking, Luo Qin staggered back 2 steps. His eyes bulged. He slowly turned his head and looked at his right shoulder in a daze. He couldn't believe. Not only did he not see Yangshin make a move, he didn't even realize his arm had been cut off. He wasn't the only one. The sect leaders and disciples who were watching, none of them clearly saw what Yangshin did. When did he move? When did he attack? How did he cut off Luo Qin's right arm? When did he return to his original position? These questions were like terrifying nightmares that quickly spread in everyone's hearts. There were too many unnecessary movements, and they were too slow. The speed of your inner strength was also so slow that it was as if it was still. Your inner strength isn't that strong. As Yangshin spoke, he casually threw Luo Qin's arm to the ground. Someone like, "You can also become a sect leader." The standard of the martial arts world in the Central Plains is worrying. He was undoubtedly mocking them. But for a moment, no one came out to refute him. What followed was Luo Qin's painful groans as he fell to the ground. After a breath, one of the Ocean Dragon sect's disciples screamed and scrambled to escape. His actions instantly triggered a chain reaction. The Ocean Dragon sect's people ran away in the blink of an eye. They didn't even want their young sect leader's body. The Beggar Clan's people were a little better. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Quickly protect the sect leader." Then, a few Beggar Clan's disciples who were nearby rushed up and dragged the unconscious Luo Qin back. They retreated with the rest of the group. With these 2 sects running away, there was no need for the White Plum cult to stay. They weren't stupid. Everyone could see that Yangshin's martial arts were so high that it wasn't something that could be stopped by numbers. No matter how many shrimp soldiers there were, it was useless against him. Who would have thought? White Plum cult members, listen to my orders. Feng Meiyu's expression was surprisingly calm. Yes. The disciples behind her came back to their senses after hearing her shout. Immediately split into 2 groups and withdraw from the town. If I don't come out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you will withdraw to the headquarters on your own. We'll discuss it again. Feng Meiyu gave the order with a very firm attitude. As for her disciples, after a slight hesitation, they quickly carried out the order. Unlike many movies, they didn't say anything like, "Sect leader, we're not leaving," or "If we're leaving together." In the real world, real people were often heartless in the face of life and death. There weren't many people who could disregard life and death to be loyal. In fact, there were very few of them. Not long after, the White Plum cult members also ran away. In the middle of the street, there were only 4 people, a corpse, and an arm left. "Look at this. You're planning to fight to the death." Yangshin wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He knew that if he wanted to plant fear in the hearts of those people, he couldn't be too fast. Sometimes, fear didn't only come from the unknown, but also from the understanding. He needed to slow down the pace of killing so that people could realize what was happening. "I'm not afraid of death." What Feng Meiyu said was the truth. Her life had long been a tragedy. After taking revenge, what she received was only endless emptiness and double torture, so she didn't really care about her life. "But I don't plan to die in vain. You plan to die together with me?" Yangshin asked again. "Not necessarily," Feng Meiyu said. Yangshin had actually already sensed the approaching threat, but he still calmly signaled for her to continue. "Because there are many people who aren't afraid of death like me," Feng Meiyu continued. When she said this, a few more people appeared on the street. To be precise, there were 5 people. There were men and women of different ages and sex, but they all had one thing in common. The 5 of them all used swords. Confucian swordsman Xie Xiuan, Purple Bamboo, Scholar Meng He, Heaven-Blessed Sword Xiu Baki, venomous spider sword Tangling, camel immortal Ma Taiyan of the South Sea. Xiangxin's gaze swept across these people's faces as he reported their names one by one. It's about time. What do you mean it's about time? Shiobaki was a thin man in his 40s. He looked gentle, but his personality was impulsive and aggressive. Do you have a short lifespan? Heiyang Shinji chuckled. He didn't care about this provocation. What I mean is, with the few of you standing here, most of the famous swordsmen in the martial arts world of the Central Plains have arrived. He wasn't wrong. Other than Duan Qi and Daoist Cotton, who were already dead, and Lung Yuqiu, who was the successor of the godly ultimate sword style, these 5 swordsmen were the most famous. It's good that you know. Tang Ling's hand was already on her sword. I'll let you see if there's no one left in the Central Plains. Shiobaki was clearly the kind of person who would throw away his life for a single breath. First, I want the sword dance sketches. Second, I don't want to take orders from you, so I think it's better to kill you. Purple Bamboo Scholar had a habit of speaking step by step, and he didn't like to lie. I don't have any other intentions. As long as they're Japanese pirates, I'll kill them on sight. Ma Taiyan's son, daughter-in-law, and grandson had all died in the hands of Japanese pirates. It could be said that he had a deep grudge against them. Therefore, he didn't differentiate between good and bad people from Dongying. You Japanese barbarian, today, I'll make you pay with your blood. It wasn't surprising that Xie Xiuwen would stand up. This master of the Xie family, who was already in a semi-retired state, had deliberately disguised himself this time and secretly came to Linlu town just to protect his grandson at a critical moment. He originally thought that his grandson had Uncle Lu with him, so he didn't have to worry too much. He would only need to act at night and on New Year's Eve. He didn't expect that Xie Wuhua would die in the inn in broad daylight. After Xie Xiuwen heard about his grandson's death, he had been looking for Lung Yuqiu. However, the latter had already left the inn and was nowhere to be found. Therefore, whether it was as a member of the Central Plains martial arts world or because of personal grudges, Xie Xiuwen had to come out and fight with the other party. Good. Xiangxin faced the 5 great swordsmen and White Plum cult leader without any fear. On the contrary, his face showed excitement. You don't have to be polite. The 6 of you can come at me together. At this moment, Xiangxin untied the belt on the weapon in his hand and tore off the rag used to wrap it. Then a 1.5-meter-long katana without a sheath and with an extremely blunt edge appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When Xiangxin picked up his weapon this time, he finally put on a real stance and said, "You guys should be able to let me have some fun." Chapter 1358. The sky was still gloomy. Waves of murderous intent filled the streets of Linlu town. Even a piercingly cold northern wind could not blow it away. Amidst the sound of the wind and the killing array, the 7 people standing there were like arrows on the bowstring. As for Oda AI and Sasaki Akira, who were outside the battlefield, they paid full attention to the movements around them. They knew very well that the true threat was the players. As for the Wanderers, they were definitely not He Yang's opponent. Whoosh! At that moment, the wind stopped. Then, the swords moved. The first to attack was the poisonous spider sword, Tang Ling. She was the only female swordsman among the 5 great swordsmen. Her qin gong was unparalleled, and her swordsmanship was unpredictable. She was also the best at using poison. Sometimes, she didn't even need to use her sword to kill her opponent. In the blink of an eye, with just a flash, Tang Ling's figure appeared behind Xiangxin. She used a light and quick sword, and the tip of the sword was aimed at the back of her opponent's heart. The blood of a swordsman. At the same time, Xiangxin said emotionally, "is the most beautiful flower in the world." Ping. As he spoke, he had already used the long and narrow blunt sword in his hand to block the attack from behind. His blocking posture looked very strange. No swordsmanship in the Central Plains would have such a posture. However, this seemingly inconceivable posture was very effective. Xiangxin didn't move his body at all. He only used the movement of his wrist and the unique shape of his weapon to block the attack of a first-rate swordsman. Just this move alone was enough to shock the 6 people who were besieging him. And this flower will only bloom in the moment of life and death. When he said the second half of the sentence, Hyang Shinji finally attacked. When he cut off Luo Kan's hand, he didn't use his sword. He only used his own hand. The block just now could not be considered as a sword strike. He was just casually defending himself. His true martial arts were about to be revealed. Buzz! A strange sound broke through the wind. It didn't sound like a sword. Instead, it sounded like a heavy weapon being swung. Be careful! In the next second, a stern shout was heard, and a swift shadow appeared. The person who shouted was the one who clearly saw Hyang Shinji's move. Among the 5 great swordsmen and Feng Meiyu, only 2 people could see this move clearly. The first one was Purple Bamboo Scholar, Meng He. However, he didn't shout. Therefore, the person who shouted, "Be careful," and rushed forward was another person, Camel Immortal from the South Sea, Ma Taiyan. In the entire martial arts world, Ma Taiyan's martial arts talent. He started practicing martial arts at the age of 7, and by the time he was 15, he was already famous. Unfortunately, he suffered from a rare congenital disease. It was not obvious when he was a teenager, but after he was 20, his back slowly bulged and became more and more deformed. In less than 3 years, his back was protruding like the bottom of a pot, and he could not straighten his back. Just like that, a martial arts prodigy who had the potential to achieve great accomplishments was held back by physiological limitations. Fortunately, Ma Taiyan didn't give up. After many years of hard practice and adaptation, he created a unique carrying pot swordsmanship. This swordsmanship could only be used by people with severe hunchbacks like him. Normal people couldn't use it. Not only could they not use it, but it was also very difficult to deal with. This was because 99% of martial arts moves were created based on the opponent standing upright. If the opponent's body was different from a normal person's, many moves would lose their effectiveness. To give a simple example, if the same move was used on a person who was 7 meters tall, it might be aimed at the heart, but if it was used on a person who was 4 meters tall, it might just graze the person's shoulder. Similarly, if it was used on a person who was 2 meters tall, it would most likely end up stabbing the person's stomach or intestines. Therefore, when fighting against the carrying pot swordsmanship, no matter how high one's martial arts skills were, they would feel powerless. These experts who were used to fighting with opponents with a straight upper body were not used to fighting with someone who had a bent waist and was used to fighting in such a posture. However, Hyang Shinji's swordsmanship was not affected by this. "Thief, watch out for my sword." Although Ma Taiyan came today for the sword dance of the grass, he was still a chivalrous person. At this moment, he saw the danger of Hyang Shinji's swordsmanship. Tang Ling might not be able to block it, so he immediately made his move. Using his unique body movement, his whole body shot out like a slingshot. Although he made his move later, he reached Hyang Shinji first. His surprise attack could be said to be a move of besieging Wei to rescue Zhao. Ma Taiyan thought Hyang Shinji was fighting one against many after all. He couldn't let himself be heavily injured just to kill one opponent. Therefore, he would definitely think of a way to defend against his sword. And this time of dodging, blocking, or hesitating was enough for Tang Ling, who had excellent Qinggong, to escape from that blunt sword. Good timing. Seeing this, Hyang Shinji said calmly, "I'll get rid of the 2 of you at once." Buzz buzz, 2 more strange noises were heard in succession. They saw Hyang Shinji take a deep step and change his move with his wrist. In an instant, the long, narrow, and heavy blunt sword disappeared from everyone's sight. Whoosh! In a fleeting second, the strange sound of the blunt sword suddenly turned into the sound of the wind. Then, Tang Ling and Ma Taiyan's movements also stopped along with the sound of the wind. Godly extreme sword style, Yehei ceiling flash. When he withdrew his sword, the blunt sword in Hyang Shinji's hand finally reappeared in everyone's sight. The moment he finished announcing the name of his move, Tang Ling and Ma Taiyan's bodies were cut into 2 at the same time. Perhaps Hyang Shinji was right. The moment the 2 swordsmen's lives disappeared, They turned into two bright red spots that bloomed on the cold ground. What an incredible monster! At this moment, Oda AI, who was watching from the back, couldn't help but whisper, "Sword drawing technique without a sheath. I've never heard of it. I didn't expect to see it with my own eyes today." Yeah, Sasaki heard his teammate's words and said softly. Not to mention, the weapon he used was an exaggeratedly large and heavy weapon. Huh. The next second, Hyang Shinji let out a rare chuckle and said, "Giving up the sheath is the beginning of Yeihei. When your wrist strength and control of your strength reach a certain level, the length of the hilt, the sharpness of the blade, and things like the sheath all lose their meaning." Obviously, he heard the conversation between the two players, so he gave them a few pointers. His carefree attitude undoubtedly stemmed from his confidence in his own strength. He had the right to be confident. The corpses of the two swordsmen and the blood-stained ground in front and behind him were the best evidence of his amazing martial arts. A few seconds later, Hyang Shinji looked at the remaining 4 people on the opposite side and provoked them with a calm tone. "Come on, it won't end like this, right?" At this moment, suddenly, "The 4 of you." A loud shout came from the side of the street. "Let this too lend you a hand." Chapter 1359. When he shouted, more than 10 people jumped out from both sides of the street and flew over Hyang Shinji's head. If one looked closely, they would notice that each of them left an extremely thin silver line in their wake. These people were naturally members of the Wild Tiger Gang. With one look, one could tell that their actions had been rehearsed many times and were very skilled. In the blink of an eye, a fine iron net was formed in the air. "Gather!" Seeing that the first step of the killing array was completed, 2G appeared on the street and gave the second order. When he shouted the word, "Gather!" dozens of Wild Tiger Gang members appeared from the surrounding streets and buildings. They started to do something similar to gathering kite string. This is when Feng Meiyu and the others realized what was going on. The iron net had already gathered. The dozens of iron wires were like dozens of sharp blades, cutting Hyang Shinji from all directions. 2G was very confident in this sneak attack. The material of the iron net was the golden steel wire that he had hired many skilled craftsmen to make with rare ores. Using the golden steel wire to encircle, the target could be said to be the Wild Tiger Gang's trump card. When he was attacking Duan Kai, 2G was not willing to use the Wild Tiger Iron Shattering Array. However, after seeing Hyang Shinji's martial arts, 2G made the decision to set up the array. He could not wait any longer. Right now, there were still 4 people facing off against Hyang Shinji. They could attract his attention to a large extent. However, after a while, the 4 people would become 3 people or 2 people. Some of them might even change sides because they were afraid of Hyang Shinji's power. At that time, even if 2G wanted to make a move, the other party might not fall for it. Moreover, there was another advantage to making a move now, and that was he had unknowingly saved the lives of the 4 masters. Later on, after he dealt with Hyang Shinji, even if he couldn't get this sword dance of the grass record alone, he would at least get a share of it. It could be said that 2G's little abacus was very good. The only thing he was worried about was, before the iron net was woven, Hyang Shinji would react in time and escape from the encirclement range. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Very soon, the line spacing of the iron net had shrunk to a size where it was impossible for a human to pass through without being injured. You're just a barbarian from a foreign country. How dare you go against the Chinese world of martial artists? I, 2G, will send you to your grave. Seeing that Hyang Shin was about to be shredded into pieces by the rapidly closing golden silk net, 2G felt at ease and issued a must-kill order. This golden steel thread was incomparably sharp and tenacious. When the clan was practicing this array, they used a horse carriage with a metal frame as an experiment. In the end, the horse and the carriage were all cut into pieces. Hence, 2G firmly believed that in front of the closed Mad Tiger Iron Shattering Formation, even if it was a young Shinji, he would definitely die. Who would have thought? What a boring guy. Facing this almost unstoppable attack, Hyangxin revealed a look of disdain and muttered this sentence. As he spoke, he drew his sword once more. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, Chu Jian had once again used his sword to slash down. The dull, blunt sword danced in his hand, emitting a frightening, cold aura. The gorgeous sword aura was as bright as the blazing sun. Godly ultimate sword style, quick slash, grand lotus. Hyangxin seemed to be used to calling out the name of his move when he finished. This time, he didn't kill anyone. He only used his godly slashing technique to cut the golden silk net that had already closed in on him into countless pieces. Tu Ji was shocked. He had done a test before. Even with his martial arts, he could only cut 1 or 2 golden steel threads at a time with a sharp sword. If the 3 golden steel threads were entangled together, he would not be able to cut them apart with a single slash. But if the golden steel threads were arranged into a net, then with a single slash he would only be able to cut off the first one he came into contact with. But Hyangxin, who was in front of him, was actually able to cut the golden steel net into pieces in a single breath. Not to mention how many strikes he had made in such a short period of time. Even if his speed was disregarded, his strength was already at an unimaginable level. On the other hand, if Tu Ji was said to be so shocked that he forgot to be afraid, then the remaining people, especially the swordsmen, were both frightened and frightened. Because they didn't know much about the golden steel threads, they were mainly focused on Hyangxin's speed. Before they saw the sword move just now, they all thought that their swords were very fast. But now, they didn't know what was fast anymore. Their definition of fast in the past seemed to have become meaningless. The confidence that they had built up over the years and their understanding of swords was on the verge of collapse. Tu Ji, as a warrior, you are very boring. Hyangxin's words pulled his opponents back from their daze. But I know, as a member of the Jianghu, as a clan leader, you are very tactful. He paused for half a second. I don't mind what you said or did just now, as long as this subordinate understands. Tu Ji didn't wait for the other party to finish his sentence and rushed to reply, calling himself this subordinate. No matter how shrewd or intelligent he was still a despicable person. So he wasn't Wang Qiong or Feng Bujue. He could only be Tu Ji. You. Before Tu Ji finished his sentence, Chiobaki was already glaring at him. You shameless thing. Are you worthy, Wild Tiger Clan? Listen to my orders. Tu Ji wouldn't waste his breath on an opponent that he didn't have the confidence to win. He ordered loudly while retreating to the side where Hyangxin was standing. Protect clan leader Hyangxin with all your strength. As for those who don't know how to appreciate favors, don't let any of them go. When clan leader unifies the Jianghu, my Wild Tiger clan will be the hero who established the clan leader. Just as he finished his sentence, a man's voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Ah, how shameless! Everyone was stunned and looked towards the direction of the voice, only to see a young general dressed in black armor with a long halberd on his shoulder, slowly walking towards them from the entrance of the town, from behind Hyangxin and the others. I wanted to wait and see, but you're just too annoying. I can't stand it anymore. Tire Dream was still talking as he slowly approached Oda AI and Sasaki Akira. Let me try to see if I can get rid of all of you at once. At the same time, on top of a building about 100 meters away from the main street, 2 figures were hiding there, watching the scene on the street from afar. Could this be? The moment Tire Dream appeared, Fong Jin's expression changed. His gaze involuntarily fell on the sword at his waist. Is the green bird reacting again? Su Huaishang's gaze was still fixed in the direction she needed to monitor, but her thoughts had already caught up with Fong Jin's. But it's not that strange. Us Outlanders basically all have a godly weapon. No, Fong Jin replied with a serious expression. The reaction this time is very special. He looked towards the battlefield again and stared at Tire Dream, who was holding a long halberd. If I'm not wrong, the weapon he's holding, I'm afraid, is Chonglu. Looking at the street again. Huh? Oda AI replied to Tire Dream's words with the gaze and tone of a delinquent girl. Are you an idiot? Get rid of all of you at once. Get rid of me? As she spoke, Her hand was already on the hilt of her katana. She moved towards Tired Dream and said, "Do you believe that I could take down 4 people like you by myself?" "Hold on." Just then, Sasaki Akira rushed forward and stopped Oda AI. "Captain, calm down." He paused. "Don't forget that there are 2 of them. If I remember correctly, this Tired Dream's teammates in S2 are all very difficult to deal with. Needless to say, Uncle Worthless, Honghu, and Shadow King are the type who are extremely good at long-range combat. What if he's purposely provoking us and baiting us?" After Sasaki's reminder, Oda AI's footsteps stopped. Even though she was bold and not astute, she wasn't completely insensible. As long as her teammates were right, she would still be able to control her impulses. Impossible. In the pugilistic world, the only person who can beat me in terms of internal energy, besides Master, is Moon. But this kid, at his age, even if he started practicing in his mother's womb, he won't be much better than me. Moreover, if he wants to control his speed to play with me, it's not enough to have a higher level of Qigong than me. He must at least have the cultivation of Master. Lung Yuchio's thoughts were naturally wrong. It was only because Yangshin hadn't been able to tell his 4 apprentices about the Outlander, or the players, which caused Lung Yuchio to still use his own common sense to evaluate the man in front of him. If Lung Yuchio could exchange a few more moves with the other party when he was in conflict with Blade Runner earlier, allowing Child Jian to show more of his strength, maybe he could also find out about the Outlander. Unfortunately, that was just a hypothesis. Well, this guy is F***king fast. If it weren't for my sufficient stamina points, there might have been an accident with the plan. Seeing that he was about to reach the target location, Feng Bujue gradually slowed down and spread his attention to his surroundings. "Let me see. Oh, over there." A few seconds later, Brother Ju used the data view to find the person who was lying in ambush in the forest. Then he slowed down. Wait. He was also very straightforward. When he was about to stop, he turned around and said, "I'm not running anymore." Lung Yuchio saw that the other party had indeed stopped running, so he slowed down as well. Even though he judged that the other party must have used up all his inner energy and stopped because he couldn't use his Qin Gong anymore, he still kept an eye out. No matter what this brat was planning, he would first place his sword on his neck before anything else. "Brother Lung, you don't have to do this, right?" Of course, Feng Bujua didn't care. Even if his neck was pressed against the blade, his attitude was still very relaxed. This was because he knew very well that since Yangshin had ordered him to live this time, Lung Yuchio wouldn't dare to bring back a dead one. "I don't want to do this either." Lung Yuchio tried his best to control his internal energy and suppress the urge to gasp for air. He pretended to be calm and said, "But what I don't want more is to wait for you to catch your breath and then follow you for 10 miles. Don't worry, you won't." At this moment, a hoarse male voice interrupted their conversation. Chapter 1360. Lung Yuchio looked sideways at the source of the voice. "Who are you?" Lung Yuchio rarely took the initiative to ask for the other person's name, but when he saw the speaker, a warrior's instinct made him curious. "Cheng Yong." Cheng Yong responded in a calm tone. He and Lung Yuchio had a lot in common. Their martial arts were very high, and the people in Jianghu didn't know the upper limit of their strength. In addition, the two of them didn't like to talk much, except when they were killing people. "Are you Wang Qiong's guard?" Lung Yuchio thought for 2 seconds and asked again. "Yes," Cheng Yong replied. Lung Yuchio nodded. "I've heard of your name, now that I've met you." As he spoke, the sword in his hand left Feng Bujue's neck. "You really live up to your reputation. I haven't made a move yet, and you already know that I live up to my reputation?" Cheng Yong continued. "Of course," Lung Yuchio said, "based on your footwork, aura, and..." His gaze slowly moved to the pair of weapons in Cheng Yong's hands, the pair of jade hooks in your hands. "I can already conclude that your martial arts are not inferior to Duan Kai or Daoist cotton." Then, Cheng Yong said again, "You should also understand why I'm waiting here." "Huh?" Lung Yuchio smiled slightly. "I understand, but I think you won't be able to achieve your goal." "You think I can't beat you?" Cheng Yong asked. You can't. Lung Yuqiu shook his head. Even if my martial arts are similar to Duan Kai and Daoist Cotton, I can't beat you? Cheng Yong asked. You can't beat me. Lung Yuqiu repeated. Even if hook is the nemesis of sword, and I'm using jade hooks, I still can't beat you? Cheng Yong asked again. You can't beat me. Lung Yuqiu said, You can't beat me, 3 times in a row in a very confident tone. Alas! Cheng Yong sighed. Looking at his expression, he seemed to agree with Lung Yuqiu's point of view. Okay. After saying these 2 words, he did something very shocking. He ran away. Even Lung Yuqiu did not expect such a turn of events. He just stood there in a daze, watching Cheng Yong use his qin gong to run back in the direction of Linlu town. It's a little strange, isn't it? Feng Bujue saw through his thoughts and laughed. What do you mean by this? After Lung Yuqiu recovered from her shock, she turned to look at Brother Ju and asked. It's simple. Feng Bujue said, We have 2 plans. He shrugged and explained in a rather relaxed tone. I think you can tell that we have already discussed the location beforehand. He will set up an ambush here, and I will be responsible for luring you here. However, after luring you here, there are 2 possibilities. He paused for a moment. The first scenario is that after close observation and testing, if Cheng Yong feels that he can defeat you, or at least be on par with you, then I will be the one running away, and he will be responsible for holding you back. If possible, it would be best to kill you. So, Lung Yuqiu continued. Right now, it belongs to the second scenario in your plan? Yes. Feng Bujue said bluntly, without a doubt. Cheng Yong admitted that he has no confidence in defeating you, or even being on par with you. So, I will be in charge of this place from now on, and he has other tasks. Oomph. Lung Yuqiu heard this and sneered. What's wrong? What's so funny? Feng Bujue asked. Of course I'm laughing at your plan. Lung Yuqiu said. What's wrong with my plan? Feng Bujue still looked very confident. Let's not talk about whether you, who are staying here at this moment, can be my opponent, Lung Yuqiu said. Lung Yuqiu said, Even if you can really deal with me for a while, what's the point? He paused for half a second. Taking a step back, if you really want to kill me, why do you have to run so far? As long as you lead me to a place a little farther away from my master, and then the 2 of you work together, the success rate, wouldn't it be much higher than now? Feng Bujue nodded. It seems that you understand the logic. With a smug look on his face, he continued, Then I'll give you another chance. Think about it carefully and see if my plan is really that funny. As soon as this sentence came out, Lung Yuqiu's smile froze, because he had already thought of something in hindsight. Then, Lung Yuqiu really did as Brother Ju said. He rethought his analysis just now and realized where the problem was. TSK. The depression of miscalculation and the previous self-righteous inference quickly turned into a kind of anger, rushing straight to Lung Yuqiu's head. He snorted and stared at Brother Ju's face. What an infuriating guy. You've figured it out, haven't you? Feng Bujue responded with a playful smile. Yes, the point of my plan is not to kill you, but to lead you to a certain distance and let your companions worry about your safety for a period of time. He paused for a second and added, To be honest, if you insisted on hiding in the dark, it would be difficult for me. Fortunately, you chose to come out into the open and meet up with your master. This saved me a lot of trouble. When saying these words, Brother Ju seemed to be clear and at ease. Obviously, he had already thought of many foolproof strategies for today's situation. No matter what the actual situation was, he had a corresponding solution. Are you so sure you will come to me? A few seconds later, Lung Yuqiu spoke again. I don't need to be sure. I just need to be more than 50% sure. Feng Bujue tilted his head and said, Also, what do you think Xingyang's mission is? Lung Yuqiu didn't know what Xingyang's mission was. Xingyang was probably going to pass on information, call for reinforcements, or spread the news that Lung Yuqiu is dead or Lung Yuqiu is seriously injured. These were only the things that Lung Yuqiu could think of in a short period of time. As for the things that he couldn't think of, although he couldn't think of it himself, he knew very well that the kid in front of him must have thought of everything. After this analysis of the situation, Lung Yuchio immediately made the most reasonable decision at the moment. Break the other party's hands and feet first, and quickly bring him back to Linlu Town. In this way, not only would he not violate his master's order to keep him alive, but he could also effectively prevent his companions from falling into some kind of trap. After thinking about what to do, he took action without saying a word. Whoosh! Just as Brother Ju finished his sentence, Lung Yuchio suddenly made his move. It was reasonable to say that a person like Lung Yuchio wouldn't suddenly attack others without saying a word, but when he thought of Brother Ju's Qin Gong and his cunning personality, he decided, in order to pursue a successful attack, I'd better give up a little of the reservedness and demeanor of an expert. However, what Lung Yuchio didn't expect was that his opponent was someone who stood on the other side of the bottom line from the beginning, looking down on, oh no, looking up at all living beings. To make a sudden attack in front of Feng Bujue, it was already polite to say that he was displaying his slight skill in front of an expert. If Lung Yuchio's strength was more than twice that of Feng Bujue's, and he had cleverly hidden himself before the sneak attack, and was not discovered until the moment he made his move, then he might have a chance. But the reality was, wow, your palm technique is also not bad. Feng Bujue leisurely dodged his opponent's continuous attacks, while saying in a mocking tone, your grappling hand is also quite good. It seems that your master is quite knowledgeable about the martial arts of the Central Plains. While speaking, Lung Yuchio had made 10 moves in a row, but they were all resolved by Brother Ju's strange posture and footwork. In the face of this kind of opponent who didn't dare to kill and was limited to melee attacks, Feng Bujue could use zero-time difference calculation to toy with him at will. Humph! Lung Yuchio was not stupid. After 10 moves, he already understood that it was absolutely impossible to take down his opponent in this way. My master didn't teach me the martial arts of the Central Plains. He stopped attacking as he spoke. I learned them from the masters of the Central Plains who were defeated by me. Oh, Feng Bujue raised his eyebrows and said, could it be that you also know the ability of mirror? You know quite a lot. Lung Yuchio also guessed the source of Brother Ju's information. Did Wang Qiong tell you? He did say a lot of things, but he didn't mention your water can also imitate other people's martial arts. Feng Bujue continued. Although there are reflections in mirror and water, the two are different. As Lung Yuchio spoke, he untied the sword from his waist and inserted it into the ground. My big brother practices the unique internal strength that my master taught him. This kind of martial arts allows him to imitate 10,000 kinds of other people's martial arts. But no matter what the appearance is, in essence, he is still using his own set of martial arts. As for me, I'm not imitating, I'm simply learning what I've seen. What he said was a bit boastful, but it was true. Lung Yuchio's talent was the highest among the illusionary flower, water, and moon. Most of the martial arts that were not too complicated and in line with the common sense of martial arts, especially external martial arts, he could learn 70 to 80% of it just by looking at it once. If he were to compare notes with a master who practiced this kind of martial arts, he would have a high chance of completely mastering it. But, to be honest, Lung Yuchio's words were not finished yet. Even if it's easy to learn, there aren't many martial arts in the Central Plains that I can really practice. Because, so far, all the fist and palm techniques that I've learned in the Central Plains are far from what my master taught me. At this point, he had already tied up the hem of his white robe and wrapped it around his waist. He also put on a low center of gravity and a sideways posture to face the enemy. Oh, seeing this, Feng Bujue still did not feel any pressure. So, your master not only knows how to wield a sword, but also knows how to fight with his fists and feet. Speaking of which, I haven't asked for your name yet. Lung Yuchio ignored Brother Ju's probing and asked a question in return. Feng Bujue thought for a moment. Since you're about to die, I'll tell you. As he spoke, he also put on a posture. His body was upright. His feet were slightly apart, his arms were raised high, his fingers were clasped together, his head was slightly raised, and his eyes were fixed on the sky. After putting on this inexplicable posture, he replied in a serious and somewhat narcissistic tone, I am the legendary Poker Man. Nonsense. Lung Yuchio gave a very objective evaluation. Then, he took a big stride forward and threw a straight punch at Brother Ju's torso. The moment he rushed forward, Feng Buju's feet also left the ground. Lung Yuchio originally thought that his opponent was simply jumping up to dodge, so he also changed his move and jumped up, ready to chase after him. Unexpectedly, Brother Ju maintained that upright posture and flew up in a straight line, higher and higher. Soon, Lung Yuchio's speed of ascension began to slow down, and then he began to fall. However, Feng Buju maintained a constant speed and flew up into the sky. How is this possible? When Lung Yuchio landed, he could not help but look up at the sky and whisper, "Can he fly?" No, Brother Ju could not fly, and at this moment, he did not use Jeppo. Before he put on the posture, just now, he quietly took out something from his backpack, Pokerman Hero ID card. Originally, this card was useless after he quit the Super Universe Alliance, but Toadman and Tin Foil Man jointly made a set of battle armor as a thank you gift for Brother Ju's contribution to their universe, and used their black technology to store it in this card. Now, Brother Ju had activated the transformation effect of this card and transformed. Chapter 1361. Katoptra Deflection wasn't the real name of Hyang Shinji's 4 disciples. It was just a nickname given to them in Jianghu legends. Other than Hyang Shinji himself, only Hyang Shinji knew their real names. More than a decade ago, the 4 of them followed their master to the Central Plains. Only Shui was given a fixed fake name, Lung Yuchio. As for the other 3, Jing was constantly changing his identity and using other people's names. Hua had to change to a new fake name every time he completed mission. As for you, as someone who had been involved in infiltration and assassination, it was impossible for him to use his real name. But today, his life of hiding his identity and living in the shadows had come to an end. Constable Fong, how have you been? As he spoke, he had already appeared behind Fong Jin and Su Huaishang. He was like a ghost, coming and going without a trace. Even Su Huaishang didn't notice Yu's presence until he was within 5 meters of her. Fong Jin turned around cautiously and asked, "Have met before?" Fong Jin had seen many experts in the past 2 days, so he wasn't surprised by the sudden appearance of someone behind him. Furthermore, the other party had already taken the initiative to greet him. He didn't launch a sneak attack or reveal any killing intent, so Constable Fong didn't have any reason to panic. "We've met before," Yu replied, "but I'm afraid Constable Fong won't be able to recognize me." Yu's appearance was nothing special. He was the kind of person who would disappear into a crowd, but that wasn't what he wanted to express. "A few years ago, we met once in Jiangnan. Back then, I was a bodyguard at Windstorm Escort Agency," Yu continued. "I remember that I even had a meal with the constable at the same table, but we didn't get to talk much." Then, Fong Jin didn't beat around the bush. He knew that being a bodyguard was just a fake identity. "Your current identity is—" Yu chuckled. Slowly, he took out a gold medallion and flashed it in front of them. "I believe Constable Fong is familiar with this, right?" Fong Jin recognized the gold medallion. He almost became the owner of the medallion, but he didn't, because he still had a conscience. "Oh, so you're a secret agent." "Pardon me." No matter what he thought, Fong Jin, who was fed by the government, still had to show some respect to this superior before him. Moon nodded. She then looked at Su Huaishang and asked, "I wonder, who is this heroine, Su Huaishang?" Without waiting for Fong Jin to introduce himself, Su Huaishang introduced herself. "Oh," Moon muttered to herself as if she didn't take her seriously. She then turned to Fong Jin and said, "Constable Fong, I'll be frank." He paused for half a second and glanced in the direction of the main street. "That's Lord Hyang Shinji over there. He's my adoptive father and also my master. My name is Hyang Tomohiko. As you've guessed, I'm also from Dongying. Based on my identity, you probably guessed it. Today, our actions are not only the will of my master, but also the decree of the current emperor. That's why I'm here to remind you. I hope you can be clear about your position. His words sent chills down Fong Jin's spine. But when he thought about it, it made sense. The martial arts world that had disappeared for a long time had unknowingly returned after all these years. It was now to the control of the imperial court. This was something the ruling class didn't want to see. In order to reclaim this unique piece of land, it wasn't surprising that they would use someone like Heong Shinji. After all, to the imperial court, this gray area could be controlled by anyone. It didn't matter if it was a Westerner, a barbarian, or even someone who wasn't human. As long as they were obedient to the imperial court, nothing else mattered. In fact, they were hoping that Heong Shinji would slaughter the entire Chinese martial arts world and make himself half dead. That way, the imperial court wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. So you're saying that you want Fong Jin to stand on your side? A few seconds later, before Constable Fong could reply, Su Huaishang spoke first. Why? Heong Zihiko could hear the hostility in Su Huaishang's voice, but his attitude was firm. Hero and Su, do you have any objections to this? If this had happened earlier, Su Huaishang might not have had anything to say about it. But now, she had seen Oda AI and Sasaki Akira in the enemy's formation. She couldn't let things go on like this. Compared to the two Sengoku players who had already allied with Heong Shinji, Su Huaishang only had Fong Jin as her ally. If Fong Jin became the lackey of Heong Shinji's disciple, then she would have no say in this. What do you think? Su Huaishang didn't answer Heong Zihiko's obvious question. Instead, she asked him a question of her own. Just as she finished speaking, the murderous intent from both sides clashed in the air. Even the air around them seemed to have turned heavy. Swoosh! At that moment, a sword was unsheathed. The one who attacked was Fong Jin. The moment the green bird appeared, the sword energy was unparalleled. This first attack was a fatal one. Ping! The two weapons clashed, and the sound of swords clashing could be heard. Heong Zihiko's weapon of choice was a short sword. The way he held his sword was a reverse grip. After the first attack, Fong Jin took 3 steps back while Heong Zihiko only took 1 step back. Constable Fong, that was some amazing kung fu. From the fact that Heong Jian was still able to use a calm tone to praise his opponent in the exchange of blows, just now he had undoubtedly gained the upper hand, as expected of the direct disciple of Blade Phoenix Meng Qing. Compared to those martial artists who only belong to large sects and clans, there is a world of difference. You flatter me. Fong Jin endured the pain from his hand and the discomfort from his chest. He replied coldly, I have learned 90% of my master's kung fu, but my mastery, I'm afraid it's not even 1/10 of her mastery. But Heong Jian changed the topic. I don't understand. Why would Constable Fong want to cross swords with me? He then turned to look at Su Huaishang. Could it be because of this woman? Fong Jin replied expressionlessly. It has nothing to do with Hero and Su. As he replied, his chaotic internal breath had gradually adjusted. The reason why I'm your enemy is very simple. He said solemnly, I can lose my official position and salary. As he spoke, he took off his hat and casually threw it away. But if I lose the dignity of a Central Plains warrior? He raised his saber again and got into a fighting stance. How can I face my master's soul in heaven in the future? Chapter 1362. Fong Jin could not be considered a good person. He was the same as most people in the world. He could not be defined as good or bad. He had done good deeds before, but he had also done evil deeds before. He once had great dreams and ambitions, but in the end, he went with the flow. Without realizing it, he was already running around for fame and fortune. Humans were complicated creatures. Everyone had their own stand, goals, and way of living. But everyone had their own bottom line. And today, Heong Jian, or rather, Heong Shinji, and the others had touched Fong Jin's bottom line. Fong Jin was indeed a member of the government. To put it bluntly, he was a lackey of the government. But aside from that, he was also a martial artist. He was Blade Phoenix Meng Qing's disciple, and he was also a part of the Chinese martial arts world. It did not matter whether it was the fights and killings between the people of the martial arts world or the various schemes that the imperial court came up with to control the martial arts world. Fang Jin could accept all of it. In fact, for his own benefit, he could choose a side in this fight, because he knew very well that no one could unify the martial arts world for a long time. It was impossible for the martial arts world to truly disappear from the world. The alliance masters of the martial arts world, the peerless elites, and even the emperor of a dynasty could only obtain temporary victories in the face of the martial arts world. Their victory would eventually dissipate with time, just like their own lives. There would always be a new era and new conflicts. It was all because of a sentence that everyone knew: where there were people, there would be martial arts world. But this time, the situation was different. In the past, no matter how fierce the fights were, they were just internal strife. But this time, the imperial court actually wanted to let a Japanese sect like Godly Ultimate Sword Style unify the Chinese world of martial artists. This was not something Fang Jin could tolerate. Even if it was just a temporary victory, the fact that the Chinese martial arts world was once dominated by a Japanese sect with only a few people would become an established fact. Perhaps the people who live in the inner court of the palace and lived in luxurious mansions would not feel anything special about this. But to Fang Jin, who was born poor and had once practiced martial arts in the martial arts world, there was no way he could accept this humiliation. Of course, considering that everyone's bottom line was different, some people might still be able to accept it. For example, someone like 2G was truly worthy of being called shameless. Alliance Master, leave the surrounding security to my wild tiger gang. You can focus on dealing with those four fellows who don't know how to appreciate favors on the main street. The three players were still locked in a stalemate in the distance. However, 2G didn't seem to care much about Weary Dream. In comparison, he was more worried about the three great swordsmen and Feng Meiyu, these famous experts. 2G, you shameless scoundrel. On the other side, Chiu Baki was so angry that his eyes turned red when he saw 2G's face. He didn't care about He Yang's words anymore. He shouted angrily and chased after 2G. I'll kill you first today. As the sound of his voice faded, Chiu Baki had already moved forward, the treasured sword in his hand sweeping out with the wind. What a joke! Seeing this, He Yang raised his sword and blocked the opponent's attack. I'm here. Do you think it's your turn to decide who lives and who dies? Who? At the same time, Xie Xiuwen and Meng, he also moved. They didn't know why they had to attack, because in their hearts, they had already lost. The scholarly swordsman and scholar Purple Bamboo were both over 60 years old. With their age and experience, they definitely didn't have the mentality of a young man who thought, even if I know I'm far inferior to you, who can say for sure if I don't fight to see who will win? The move He Yang used to kill Ma Taiyun and Tang Ling had already destroyed the fighting spirit of Xie Xiuwen and Scholar Purple Bamboo. However, they still attacked in the end. Perhaps they thought, even if they can't win, they can at least save Chiu Baki's life. Or maybe they just wanted to sacrifice themselves to help Chiu Baki kill that scum 2G. Or maybe their thoughts were similar to Fang Jin's. Instead of letting them live in a Jianghu dominated by Dongying people, they might as well fight to the death. Even if they died, everything would be over. No one knew what they were thinking. Just like I said, even they didn't know. Of course, that wasn't important anymore. There were some things that didn't need to be thought too clearly. People only wanted to live with a clear conscience. For a swordsman, death wasn't scary. What was scary was that when he should attack, he didn't even have the courage to swing his sword. Buzz. A second later, the blunt sword's strange sound rang out again. This also meant that Hyang Shinji had attacked again. Godly extreme, sword style, profound meaning, double swallow return. This time, Hyang Shinji attacked at the same time as he announced the name of the move. Judging from his eyes and tone, this was the most serious attack he had ever made. Xie Xiuwen's Xie family's sword technique and Meng, his 13 swords of purple bamboo, were both top-class sword techniques in the Chinese world of martial artists. Both of them had great qi accumulated over more than 100 years, and there was no need to doubt their strength. Even though Hyang Shinji's martial arts were much better than anyone else's, he still had to use all of his attention to deal with the joint attack of these two top-notch martial artists in the Central Plains. He gathered all the internal energy in his body, and his whole body emitted a strong do chi. His posture was stable, as heavy as a mountain. However, the blunt sword in his hand seemed incredibly light at that moment. It was as light as an ear of wheat. Clang! Two quick sounds rang out, and they were as fast as lightning. Two quick shadows turned into sword glares. Extremely powerful martial arts and ingenious sword techniques intersected with each other in the cold wind. And there was only one winner, cough. Irk! When Meng He coughed up blood and fell to the ground, he didn't look at Hyang Shinji. Instead, he looked at Xie Xiuwen, who had fallen to the ground before him. The two of them were old rivals. As two of the best swordsmen of the same generation, they were naturally often compared by others. Over the past few decades, they had fought against each other 3 times, but they always ended in a draw. They did not expect that at this moment, in this place that made others feel despair, they would actually fight against each other. Both of them attacked the same opponent at the same time. In the end, half of Xie Xiuwen's neck was cut off, and Meng He managed to dodge a little, but his throat was slit. Although there was not much difference in the outcome, to them, this difference was enough. Before they took their last breaths, the two of them exchanged glances, burying all the words they wanted to say in silence. They had no regrets in life and no regrets in death. With this realization in mind, another 2 peerless swordsmen fell into a pool of blood. At the same time, Baki's sword had pierced 2G's heart. But ha! 2G's sinister laughter sounded like a death knell in Baki's ears. What a good heavenly sword. This sword technique is really unavoidable. Baki's mouth was bleeding profusely. It turned out that when he stabbed 2G, he was also hit in the heart by 2G's Wild Tiger Bites the Heart. The internal injury caused by this palm was undoubtedly destructive. What a pity. Although your sword technique is good, your brain is not very good. 2G mocked. Why don't you think about it? With my martial arts, how can I stand still and fight you when I know that you're going to fight me to the death? As he spoke, he lowered his head and looked at his wound. There was not even a drop of blood there. This golden silk armor is a priceless treasure. It can block all the sharp weapons in the world. Back then, I used 2 beautiful concubines and a whole carriage of expensive calligraphy and paintings to exchange for it. Now it seems that it was worth it. Bang! Just when 2G was feeling proud, something strange happened. Feng Meiyu, who had been looking for an opportunity to attack from the side, suddenly appeared behind Baki and slapped his back with her palm. At that moment, 2G thought that Feng Meiyu was the same as him. She had decided to switch sides and side with Hyang Shinji. But he did not expect that. After a breath, the tip of Baki's sword suddenly pierced forward again, piercing through the golden silk armor and piercing 2G's heart. Ugh! 2G screamed in shock. But it was too late for him to retreat now. Hero Chio, sorry for the offense. Feng Meiyu said as she retracted her palm. Baki, who had fallen, had a relieved smile on his face. He coughed out blood and laughed. What are you saying? Thank you, miss. Before he could say the word help, he breathed his last. For a person whose heart meridian had been shattered, it was already a miracle that he could hold on until Feng Meiyu's palm passed through him. No, I can't die. 2G, who was lying on the ground, was not as calm as Baki. Until the moment before he died, he appeared to be in extreme pain. He was almost hysterical as he babbled nonsense. He looked like a puppet controlled by desire. He looked at the strings on his body being torn apart one by one and made a final struggle. But his ending was still death. I have to praise you. After a moment, Hyang Shinji glanced at 2G's corpse as if he was looking at trash. He then turned to Feng Meiyu and said, even if he was a dog, to be able to kill him in front of me is also a skill. He seemed to be a little angry. Then, Sect Master Feng, you should have the corresponding awareness, right? Heh. Feng Meiyu revealed a disappointed smile. To be honest, I thought that I was the same as 2G. I was as ambitious as him and didn't care about the so-called benevolence, righteousness, and morality. Everything I did was for myself. Logically speaking, I should have led the White Plum sect to seek refuge with you without hesitation. But I can't do that. As Feng Meiyu spoke, she turned around and faced Hyang Shinji without fear. When I saw 2G's appearance when he died, I finally understood the difference between him and me. She paused, a smile still hanging on her morbidly obese face. He's a dog. I'm a human. As she spoke, she had already gathered 120% of her power and was ready to fight to the death. Hyang Shinji, your martial arts are indeed very high. Perhaps you're really invincible. But remember, not everyone will yield in the face of power and benefits. We, the people of the martial arts world, also have a line that cannot be crossed. We swear that we won't let you cross it even if we die. Soga, so that's how it is. Naruhodo, so that's how it is. Hyang Shinji heard this and coldly said something in his hometown. Then he continued in the Central Plains language. If that's how it is, then I will step on your corpses and cross that line. Buzz buzz, his blunt sword moved again. To Hyang Shinji, killing Feng Meiyu didn't require any moves. A simple slash was enough. But this time he had used his full strength in his slash. Because he was angry. Although he spoke coldly on the surface, Hyang Shinji was unable to restrain the anger in his heart. To a person who believed that he was invincible and wanted to use force to make everyone submit to him, he could laugh off the denial of his strength, but denying his values was unforgivable. Hyang Shinji had already made up his mind. He wanted to use this angry slash to cut this shamelessly boastful fat woman in front of him in half. The uglier her death, the better. But unexpectedly, the moment his sword swept out, a figure appeared. A graceful silhouette appeared in a flash. 2 streaks of sword light, accompanied by a cold shout, demonic style, weeping blood. Chapter 1363. Hyang Shinji was shocked by the force that came from his wrist. It was the last time his sword had been blocked by someone. He could no longer remember clearly. He had never thought that there would be someone in the Chinese world of martial artists who could do this. Who are you? Hyang Shinji didn't know the young female swordsman in front of him. Even though he had memorized all the information about Jianghu provided by the imperial court, he couldn't remember anything about this person. Li Ruoyu. Ruoyu's answer was also very simple. She only said her name and didn't mention her sect or nickname. Hyang Shinji's reaction wasn't slow either. He quickly realized that this person might be the same as Oda AI and the others, a so-called foreigner. May I ask, what swordsmanship do you use? Hyang Shinji asked again. Ruoyu expressionlessly separated her 2 swords and bounced back Hyang Shinji's blunt sword. Hyang Shinji also took a few steps back. In the next second, Ruoyu first turned the golden sword in her right hand slightly, magic flowing sword. Then, she slightly raised the invisible water sword in her left hand. Mark of the wind. All right. When Hyang Shin saw the 2 sword for the first time, a serious look appeared in his eyes. I will use my godly supreme sword stream to seek advice from you. Just as he was about to use all of his internal energy to attack, wait. Suddenly, another voice was heard. Just by hearing this shout, many people could tell that this person didn't have any internal energy. However, this person's influence was no less than any of the famous Jianghu people. Mr. Yang, don't be in a hurry to attack, Wang Qiong said as he walked out of an alley. Cheng Wei was right next to him, and he was holding someone hostage with his sword. It was a woman who looked to be around 30 years old. She was very beautiful, but not extremely beautiful. Even if she was 10 years younger, she wouldn't be more beautiful than Ruo Yu or Su Huaishang in the real world. Her name was Heiyang Jingzi, which was the flower in the mirror flower, water, and moon. For the sake of your adopted daughter's safety, Wang Qiong said as he walked, I think we should have a talk first. The moment he saw Jingzi, Hyang Shin had already roughly guessed what had happened, and his expression became even more gloomy. Man or head Wang, you're indeed no ordinary person. This time, Yang stared at Wang Qiong and said coldly, "The heart assimilation, soul-searching divine art that Jingzi learned was a unique skill created by my dead wife. In this world, as long as it's a normal man, it's impossible for him to not be affected by it. My wife has only taught me the mental cultivation method that can ignore the effects of this divine technique. I have only taught it to a few of my disciples." He paused for a moment. "As for you, manor head Wang, as a man, not only were you not controlled by the divine power, you even had a way to remove the power from Jingzi's body. This, huh?" Wang Xiong heard this and laughed. "I know, you must be very curious. How can I do such a thing?" He put his hands behind his back and walked a few steps forward. "It's actually very simple, because I've also learned a unique mental cultivation method. This mental cultivation method not only allows me to not be affected by all kinds of martial arts and drugs that confuse the mind, but it also allows me to clearly see the weak points of those who practice these martial arts." Jiangxin raised his eyebrows slightly and asked suspiciously, "You know martial arts?" The information that the imperial court gave him didn't mention this. "Martial arts. There are many kinds of martial arts." Wang Qiong said, "I don't know the martial arts that you guys practice in killing. I've only learned a few martial arts that cultivate the body, nourish the heart, and prolong my life." He paused for half a second and continued, "For example, the mental cultivation method that I mentioned just now was created by an imperial expert more than 100 years ago. It's called the Grand Yuan Xian method. This martial art isn't very difficult to learn. Once you've mastered it, you don't need to practice it anymore. The effect of the mental cultivation method is as natural as breathing, and it doesn't require any inner energy to activate it." Ridiculous. Jiangxin didn't seem to believe what he said. How can there be such a martial art in this world? Even if there is, what's the point of creating such a martial art? Huh? Wang Xiong's face was full of disdain. He laughed dryly. "The martial arts of the Central Plains are broad and profound. Martial arts doesn't have to be martial arts. It can also be Tao or virtue. As the saying goes, the benevolent is invincible. The martial arts that you think are meaningless are the real superior martial arts. Using martial arts to enter Tao, using Tao to cultivate the heart. This kind of martial arts is the nemesis of those martial arts that only pursue killing and control." Oomph. This was already the second time in a short period of time that Yang Xinji's values had been denied. One could imagine the anger in his heart. "All right, you could try to use that high-grade martial art of yours that can only train your temperament to survive under my sword." When he said this, the murderous aura in his body was about to burst out. "Wait." This time, Wang Qiong was really shocked. "Your disciple is still, ha ha ha." Jiangxin laughed out loud. "If you're happy, then kill her. She's useless now." When he said this, needless to say, Wang Qiong and the others were shocked. However, Jiangxin and Jingzi were completely stunned. Buzz buzz, in the blink of an eye, Jiangxin's sword had already moved before he stopped laughing. Fortunately, the person who was standing in the front line, facing his blunt sword, was the calmest among all the people present. "Godly ultimate sword style, Yehei water cut, wind pass, trace." Both sides used their ultimate moves. Their dual blades moved together, bringing with them endless sword power. They were as fast as flying meteors. Bang! Immediately after, there was a loud bang, and a violent blast of air blasted out. This invisible force caused the ground where the two of them were standing to suddenly sink. The buildings on both sides of the street were also shaken to the point that they were about to collapse. Feng Meiyu, who was standing behind Ruoyu, reacted quickly. At that critical moment, she had already used her lightness skill to turn around and escape. She also grabbed Wang Qiong, who was unable to react in time. Seeing this, Chengwei looked at her with gratitude. At the same time, he pulled Jingzi and jumped out of the terrifying killing formation created by Jiangxin and Li Ruoyu. At this moment, Ruoyu, who was in the middle of the battlefield, thought to herself, "If this continues, we'll lose." Although she only received 2 attacks from Jiangxin, It was enough for Ruo Yu to make a judgment about He Yongxin's strength. In the first attack, Ruo Yu used her move to fight against He Yongxin's chop, which contained 100% of his strength. Both of them were evenly matched. After that, He Yongxin was forced to retreat by Ruo Yu's sword. He just wanted to be cautious and keep a distance from her. It didn't mean that he had to retreat. In the second attack, He Yongxin used his move this time. Ruo Yu also used her move to fight against it. The results seemed to be similar, but in fact, Ruo Yu knew that under the same conditions, she would be at a disadvantage after 5 more attacks. Ruo Yu didn't think too much about this because after the second attack, He Yongxin made the same judgment as her. So, He Yongxin decisively made the most correct choice. He took advantage of the situation and performed a series of attacks. At the same time, on the other side of the main street, Tired Dream also saw the confrontation between Ruo Yu and He Yongxin. So, he finally made his move. At first, Tired Dream showed himself to put on a 1 versus many attitude, so that the two of them would let down their guard and wait for an opportunity to win. However, after hearing Teacher G's name, the two of them immediately took a cautious defensive stance, which made both sides enter a stalemate. Now, Ruo Yu's appearance made things even more urgent. If she took away the sword dance grass record first, things would become more complicated. Tired Dream wasn't someone who liked to deal with complicated situations. He would rather suffer a small loss and let things be solved on a simple track. Ha! A loud shout announced the start of the battle. The moment their angry eyes met, killing intent rose from both sides. Tired Dream was still attacking from the front, facing 2 enemies who were already on guard. In this situation, speed and skill weren't very important. Absolute strength was the most effective starting point. Tired Dream's next move was the Mountain Ridge Splitting Peak. His long spear swept, vast power and ferocious spear momentum galloped over. Sasamu's 6-sword series of moves were mostly feminine and unpredictable. Faced with such a killer move, one could only avoid the sharp edge and use body movement to retreat. Oda AI was different. Her personality was hot-blooded and proud. As one of the geniuses recognized by Meng Jingchan, in terms of fighting talent and the hard strength of her character, she was definitely not below Tired Dream. If it weren't for her fear of Teacher G, she would have already gone up to fight Tired Dream one-on-one. Now that this move was coming, Oda AI, who had already gathered her strength, almost didn't think twice and decided to fight back head-on. At that moment, her body sank and the strength of her feet poured out. Her whole person was like a beast out of the cage, fiercely rushing forward to meet the opponent's skill. Whoosh! After a breath's time, Oda AI's naked dash snow break had cut a hole in Weary Dream's Do-Chi formation of mountain-destroying peak splitting. This tactic of using line to break surface wasn't something that Oda AI came up with after much thought. She just used this move subconsciously. This was talent. Using instinct to accomplish what others need to think to accomplish. It didn't sound like a very complicated definition, but if one thought about it carefully, it was a ruthless gap. Tired Dream didn't have that kind of talent, and he was also very clear he might never be able to reach the realm that those geniuses could easily step into. But it didn't matter. Even if Oda AI's talent and strength were above his, it didn't mean that he would definitely lose. Come on. Looking at Oda AI, who had broken his move, Tired Dream was still excited, but his heart was still as cold as ice. As he spoke, he had already taken advantage of the situation to pull back his spear and swiftly advance. The tip of his spear flashed, transforming into 3 cold stars. Oda AI stepped into danger and was in danger, but it wasn't to the point where she was at her wit's end. In the face of that sharp and dangerous move, not only did she not slow down her forward speed, she took advantage of the momentum to get up and let her body turn in the air. She changed from cut to stab and drilled into the center of the spear shadow. Neither of them retreated, and their killing moves intersected. Between the sword and spear, there were sparks of starlight and waves of fierce sounds. After the exchange of moves, both of them suffered different degrees of minor injuries, but their killing intent didn't diminish. In the blink of an eye, They came back in a swirl of dust. Seeing this, Sasaki Akira also took advantage of the gap and rushed in for Oda AI. His six-sword extreme style was unusually dangerous, and in the blink of an eye, it suppressed Tired Dream's spear power by 30%. At this moment, suddenly, a man who looked like a player shouted as he ran from the direction of the town entrance. If it were someone else, maybe the two from Sengoku wouldn't care much, but the one who came was the legendary teacher Xiao. The two from Sengoku felt that they could take down Tired Dream, but when they saw teacher Xiao, their offensive unconsciously weakened a little. Tired Dream also got some breathing room because of this. At this moment, Tired Dream himself also laughed bitterly. I was unexpectedly saved. Originally, Tired Dream had already discussed with teacher Shui that no matter what happened, even if the former died, the latter should not come to his aid. This was because teacher Shui's strength was really average, and it was definitely impossible for him to face the top players in the town head-on. It was better to let him hide outside and fight to the death. Perhaps at the very end, when everyone was defeated and injured, he would still have the opportunity to steal the chicken. But he didn't expect that when Tired Dream was still trapped in this crisis, teacher Xiao would actually rush into the town himself and help Tired Dream out. "Old Bai, you're really something." Tired Dream was still fighting and retreating, and he even raised his voice to greet his teammates. Unexpectedly, the line that responded to him was, teacher Xiao was still shouting, "Feng Bujiwe is coming over in a mech." Chapter 1364. Note: Nita's song in this chapter is the episode of the second episode of Goodnight Tribe's video series, A Man on a Mission. Forget it. Void Thunderbeast. If there is a similarity, it is not a coincidence. A few months ago, in another universe, use Super Alliance headquarters in a laboratory. "Hey guys, how's the progress?" As he said this, the tinfoil man leisurely entered the room with a cup of strangely colored hot drink in his hand. "If you're free, come over and give me a hand." At this moment, Toadman was in front of a supercomputer performing operations that were far beyond the scope of human ability, like a tentacle monster. Based on a rough estimation, his EAPM, effective actions per minute, or effective operations frequency per minute, was at least above 500. The tinfoil man laughed. "It's just a farewell gift. Aren't you being a little too serious?" "If I were serious..." Toadman did not stop what he was doing. He replied indifferently, "I would have given him a set of Hell Toad armor." He paused. "I just don't like to owe people favors, so even if the favor may never be repaid, you have to give something in return that is commensurate with its value, right?" The tinfoil man asked, taking over his words. Before Toadman could answer, Dr. Yongheng, who was busy on the other side of the experiment table, raised his head and said to the tinfoil man, "This is a matter of principle. Kratas, Pokerman's contribution to the U Super Alliance may be far beyond what we know, and we probably don't even know what he has done." "Oh." The tinfoil man quickly heard some subtle information from the other party's words. "You mean our memory has been interfered with?" "It may not be a problem with memory." Toadman spoke again at this time. "Maybe even the timeline we are in has been interfered with in some way. Of course, changes that happen in dimensions that we can't perceive may be no changes to us because we have disappeared from this timeline before the changes." "So," the tinfoil man narrowed his eyes and looked at Dr. Yongheng. "Doctor, do you know something?" "I don't know anything." Dr. Yongheng shrugged and replied, "I'm relying on intuition. You know, this is a talent unique to us Earthlings. Although it's vague, it's a trait that's very close to superdimensional ability." Okay, Mr. Intuition," Tinfoil Man replied in a teasing tone. He put down the drink in his hand and walked to the experiment table. "Let me see. What are you building?" He stared at the design on the holographic platform, which was so complicated that it made his scalp tingle for about 10 seconds. Then, his expression changed a little. Hey, what kind of black technology is this?" The tinfoil paper man looked at Professor Yongheng. "Have you recently developed a new magic science system?" Professor Yongheng smiled and replied, "I'm not that good. He looked up at the holographic image and said, "This thing, I found it in a void rift in a universe called Azeroth when I was spiritually wandering. It looks like some kind of scrap combat weapon. I thought that the manufacturing process and the enchantment on it were very interesting, so I picked it up and brought it back." Interesting. As the tinfoil paper man listened to Professor Yongheng's narration, he also further analyzed the design in front of him. So, this can be done like this. He quickly immersed himself in a kind of scientist mode and began to talk to himself. He was in a daze for a minute or two. Finally, Toadman could not help but call out to him twice. Hey, Kratos." Oh, sorry. I was a little lost in thought." The tinfoil paper man came back to his senses and replied, "We have less than 10 universe weeks to complete this, and according to my understanding of you, you'll definitely have to participate in the modification of this design, so," Toadman said, "you'd better hurry up and bring out your universe-level IQ. Don't just stand there and act like you have Alzheimer's." "Ah, I understand." The tinfoil paper man's interest was also piqued at this moment. He eagerly continued, "You don't have to tell me. I can't wait to get to work." Time returned to the present. In the sky above Linlu town, a strange humanoid armor about 4 meters tall flew down from the sky, just like that, and the pilot in the torso of this mech was Feng Bujue. The moment he appeared on the scene, for some reason, music suddenly sounded in the ears of every player nearby. After about 30 seconds of quite heated prelude, there was actually a male voice singing the lyrics along with the music. "High-tech armor that reflects light, an earth-shattering and magnificent appearance. When humans face a great threat, they will push me to the front of the monsters. Clearly, you have powerful missiles, but you want me to get close to the enemy and swing my fist. Clearly, you have a strong fortress, but you want me to use my body to block the enemy's hail of bullets. The machine will only get older with each use. No matter how many times you change the oil, it will be useless." Hot-blooded shouting is also futile. When the mech is destroyed, the enemy is still there. The doctor will bring out a secret new model, the abandoned hero, EX. Void Thunder Beast, large-scale trash collection on Tuesday. Void Thunder Beast drink. When the song ended, Feng Bujue just happened to descend from the sky. Boom! The mech landed on the ground with a deafening roar. At this moment, whether it was the Sengoku duo and Lao Meng, Ruo Yu and Heong Shinji, Su Huaishang, Feng Jin, and Heong Tomohiko, everyone who was fighting stopped fighting and looked at the Void Thunder Beast EX that suddenly appeared on the battlefield with different expressions. To the NPCs, the shock brought about by this mech was self-evident. The people in their world had never seen anything like this before. Their concept of a large humanoid combat weapon was also a blank. Most people had already regarded it as some kind of demon or ghost for the players. After they finished listening to the song, the same thought appeared in their minds. I might have played a fake Thriller Paradise. Looks like everyone has shown themselves. That's good. Several seconds later, Feng Bujue's despicable voice came through the mech speaker. "Now that things have progressed to this stage, I don't want to waste my breath on you." He was full of mockery. "Come on, who wants to come forward to accept their death first?" Phew! Hearing his line, Ruo Yu sighed in relief. The plan really can't keep up with the changes. Her sigh was a kind of helplessness. Admittedly, the combat power of the players was already very high, but the difficulty of this scenario was not as easy as they had expected. First, Heong Shinji's power was far beyond their expectations. Second, Heong Shinji's indifference to Hannah's life was also outside of their plan. Just these two miscalculations made Feng Bujue's plan of splitting up and killing lose its meaning. However, just as Ruo thought that the plan to take over the sword dance was going to fail, Feng Bujue returned in such a state. His return and his performance proved one thing. The mech stored in his hero ID card was much stronger than he had expected by a lot. The strength of this mech made Brother Ju come to the conclusion that there was no need to split up the enemies to take them down one by one. No need to use hostages to delay Heong Shinji, and no need to wait for the other players to fight until both sides were heavily injured. Based on what he said, he could start to take down the enemies with a high profile. What is that? After all, Hyang Shinji was the strongest player there, and he had already learned some information about the Outlanders, or players, so he soon calmed down and started to think about how to take down the mech. Could it be some kind of demonic spell that allows one to transform into a metal object? But to his surprise, his low mumbling was heard by Brother Ju. What the hell are you talking about? Feng Bujue turned on a loudspeaker and yelled at Hyang Shinji, who was about 100 meters away. You're the only one who's so talkative. Then it's decided that it's you. He paused for a second before yelling, Take this. Fourth Industrial Revolution Esoteric Positron Cannon. After that roar, what he did next was nothing more than pressing the switch with his finger. Then a white-edged red, concentrated beam of light shot out from the energy furnace in the chest of the Void Thunder God Beast EX with a loud rumble. Brother Ju said he was going to attack Hyang Shinji, but in reality, this shot was aimed at the whole street. Chapter 1365. From the very beginning, Feng Bujue did not plan to steal the Sword Dancer Barium. This was because when he saw the main mission of this scenario, he had read a very important hidden message from it. Obtain the Sword Dancer Barium before the other players and maintain ownership of it for 1 hour. At first glance, this was a very simple and straightforward mission. Most people would remember 2 things after reading the mission details. 1. Obtain the Sword Dancer Barium. 2. Keep the manual with them for 1 hour. Then, they would start to think about their next move or move on to something else. However, Feng Bujue's thought process was different. After he saw the mission, the word that popped up in his mind was earlier. From a subjective point of view, the hidden meaning behind these 2 words was likely to be overlooked. But from the perspective of an opponent and a bystander, there's a lot to be said about the meaning of these 2 words. First, from the most basic setting, this newly introduced team battle mode was, in essence, a killing game. Since it was a scenario of this format, no matter what the side quests and hidden quests were, the main quest that the system gave to the players would be the same. In other words, all the teams would receive the mission description of obtain the Sword Dancer Barium before the other players. So, here came the problem. Even though it was a very simple thing, very few people realized one fact. There would only be one team that would be able to obtain the Sword Dancer Barium first. This was because only the first team to obtain the Sword Dancer Barium would fit the concept of first. When the members of the first team obtained the ownership of the item, even if the other teams snatched the item away, they would be able to do so after them, and obtain the Sword Dancer Barium before the other players did not fit the mission description. In other words, once the Sword Dancer Barium fell into the hands of a team, then the team that obtained the Sword Dancer Barium would have completed half of the main mission. As for whether they could complete the other half, that was another story. The key point was that, from this moment on, all the other teams that were hostile to this team had lost the possibility of achieving the condition of being earlier than the other players. At that time, the system would naturally notify those people that the main mission has failed, and they would definitely realize that there was a hidden meaning in the description of this mission. At this point, those people had lost the way to win by completing the main mission. They were only left with another way to win, killing all their opponents. If this was the main plot from the beginning, it would have been fine. There were many strategies to achieve this goal, but in this scenario, there would be a team that owned the Sword Dance of the Grass. If they were left alone, they would win the main quest in 1 hour, and the scenario would be over. In this case, under the premise that everyone was enemies with each other, they still had to think of a way to eliminate the party that was holding the Sword Dance of Grass within an hour. Furthermore, eliminating the party might not be the end of it. No one could say for sure whether or not the Sword Dance of Grass would trigger a new main quest if the Sword Dance of Grass changed hands. In any case, after this analysis, Feng Bujue soon understood. This main storyline that did not look that complicated was actually incredibly difficult to understand. Even if he did not know that the Sword Dance Herbarium was owned by a super powerful boss like Hyang Shinji, he did not plan to do that main quest. And the subsequent development confirmed his thought. The players who thought the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind after reading the quest, like flashes of sword, and not a scaredy cat who had been hiding in the dark had undoubtedly underestimated the system's cunningness and scheming ability, including Tired Dream, who had previously discussed with teacher Katsu to let him lie dormant to pick up the scraps, and the Sengoku duo, who foolishly stood by Hyang Shinji, and even Goddess Su. Everyone took it for granted that this was a script with snatching the sword manual as the core. But in reality, compared to that method of winning, the person who planned from the beginning to win by killing all their opponents would have more advantage. That person was Fong Bujue. The focus of his plan that day was to make use of the other players' obsession with the sword dance of the grass and the deviation in their interpretation of the main quest. He used Hyang Shinji as bait to force the other players out. As long as everyone was in the open, Fong Bujue had 100 ways to kill his opponents. Therefore, Brother Ju did not mind showing up early, and he did not care who would get the sword dance of the grass first. He scattered and restrained the combat power of Hyang Shinji and the others. He had Ruoyu fight with Hyang Shinji and pretended that he wanted to snatch the sword dance of the grass. The basic purpose of these actions was to balance the different forces and make the situation more chaotic. This way, the players would come out one by one for different purposes. Of course, in the process of this plan, there were some accidents. One of them was Hyang Shinji. This boss was not simple. Whether it was his strength or his reaction to threats, he was above Fong Bujue's estimation. He was quite troublesome. Fortunately, Brother Ju's miscalculation was the second. It was the Void Thunder Beast EX that Toad Man and the others gave him. Brother Ju originally thought that the heroes only gave him a set of tinfoil armor. It was just right to use this kind of high-tech gadget to bully the NPCs in the wuxiao world. At least in the initial confrontation, the NPCs would most likely be crippled by the machine guns, laser beams, and missiles that they had never seen before. Who would have thought that the three bigwigs of the Wuxiao Alliance would be serious about this? Perhaps they thought that since Poker Man would bring this thing to another universe, it would not harm their own territory no matter what happened. Therefore, the Tinfoil Man, who was responsible for the hard-tech part, enthusiastically adjusted the size and physical combat power of the armor to be similar to the anti-Hulk armor of some universe. Toadman, who was responsible for the soft-tech part, added many experimental dark-tech weapons to the armor. There were things that he did not dare use in his own universe. Lastly, Professor Yongheng, who was responsible for the additional functions, probably because he was also an Earthling, very considerately gave his fellow countrymen's armor various powerful magical technology buffs. Just like that, a set of humanoid armor with unlimited energy, physical and magical powers, and amazing combat power was born. It was just that its appearance was slightly strange. After Void Thunder Beast EX appeared in the scenario, its first experimental subject was Lung Yuqiu. I won't go into detail about what happened in that small forest. In any case, Lung Yuqiu is no longer alive, and his corpse is nowhere to be found. Everything happened very quickly, and everyone can imagine the specific process on their own. Now, that Fong Bujue had fired the positron cannon. It was unstoppable. Now, the advantage of the players could be seen. Basically, when they heard Brother Ju say the words Fourth Industrial Revolution, they instinctively felt the danger. Oda AI, Sasaki Akira, Keimano, and Teacher Jun, these for who were closer to Brother Ju, started a run before he finished saying the words ultimate. At this moment, they had no intention of attacking each other. They had the same thought in their minds. No matter what Fong Bujue is going to do, I have a feeling that if I stand here and wait for him to finish, I might die. On the other hand, Ruoyu, who stood further away, knew Brother Ju better than the others, so when she heard the words "it's decided to be you," she had already turned to run. As she ran, she also confirmed the location of Wang Qiong and the others. Seeing that they had already run out of sight, Ruoyu also breathed a sigh of relief. At this point, you should have seen it. The moment Brother Ju launched the attack on the main street of Linlu Town, the only living person left was Hyang Shinji. He did not know what the positron cannon was, so he did not run away immediately. It was not until the energy furnace on Void Thunderbeast EX's chest glowed red that he realized something. Boom. With a loud boom, a red beam of light shot through the street. The terrifying power of the beam was something no one in this world had ever seen before. Everything that came into contact with the beam, mainly corpses and scattered weapons, was obliterated even if they were only grazed by the edge of the beam of light. After the explosion, a trench-like mark was left in the middle of the street, and the temperature of the entire street rose by at least 20 degrees. As for Hyang Shinji, he was nowhere to be found. Holy SH**T. Has the boss been blown to smithereens? Teacher Chi could not help but mutter as he poked his head out to take a look. Most people would have come to this conclusion after seeing this scene. However, he ran away. Feng Bujue, who was inside his armor, had already begun to search for his enemy's whereabouts. If Hyang Shinji did not dodge the attack, he would have died. If Hyang Shinji died, the sword dance of grass would be buried with him. If the sword dance of grass was gone, the main quest would have failed. If the main quest failed, the system would have notified him. In conclusion, since the system did not notify him, Hyang Shinji must have dodged the positron cannon. In an instant, a series of deductions formed in Brother Ju's mind, and they formed into a conclusion. If geniuses were people who used their instincts to surpass their thinking, then Feng Bujue was someone who used his thinking to surpass his instincts. His accurate and swift judgment allowed him to react faster than anyone else on the scene to what was about to happen next. Godly ultimate sword style, profound. After one breath, Hyang Shin held his sword high in the sky and flew down like thunder. Heaven's calamity cut. Huh, you're asking for it. Feng Bujue's lips curled into a smile. His eyes and hands moved around the control panel at an alarming speed as he came up with a response. Fourth Industrial Revolution, defensive style, bullet screen. Even though what Brother Ju did was to open the hatch on the shoulder of the mecha and release the bullet screen to sweep through the sky, he still stubbornly used the loudspeaker to shout out the name of a move that he had made up on the spot. Even though his method was a bit of a bully, it was effective. Technological weapons were very effective against wuxia characters. Even for a boss-level existence like Hyang Shinji, facing this attack head-on, there was an 80% chance that he would be finished. Mr. Hyang, I'll cover you. To his surprise, at this moment, Sasaki Akira suddenly appeared from the side. This was the only male member of the Warring State Squadron from the S2 era. Even though he had been in a sickly state and kept a low profile, in terms of raw power, even if he was matched up against flashes of sword, he would not be at a disadvantage. Most importantly, Sasaki Akira's ability to analyze and grasp the situation of a battle had always been excellent. He was always able to deal the most effective damage when the enemy was at their most vulnerable. For example, right now, he was closing in on Void Thunderbeast EX at high speed while the bullet screen was still being released. With this move, he caught Brother Ju's weakness. Because bullet screen was an action that needed to be performed continuously, it usually had to wait until the enemy's attack ended before stopping. Otherwise, the effect would be reduced. Therefore, Brother Ju, who was in the middle of releasing the bullet screen at Hyang Shinji, could not respond to Sasaki Akira's attack at the same time. Sickness Sword Bamboo Dragonfly. Sasaki Akira saw the opportunity. He spread his arms, and his whole body spun like a bamboo dragonfly, attacking Void Thunderbeast EX. Even though his move looked a bit childish and ridiculous, its power was no worse than the conventional moves of a fighter. Especially when dealing with a large enemy, its lethality was amazing. It seems interesting. Let me see if I can cut this guy. 2 seconds later, Oda AI also followed Sasaki Akira to attack. Her ability to interpret the situation of a battle may not be as good as her teammates, but her reaction and movements were very fast. When she saw Sasaki Akira move, she immediately understood that this was a good opportunity, and she also attacked. They really know how to play. Feng Bujue saw this change and was quite upset. He also knew that Sengoku was also a character who could dismantle a Gundam with their bare hands. Even if their instantaneous destructive ability was not as good as Yang Shinji's, they could still attack together. It's time to show you the real operation. In the next second, Brother Ju once again showed his extraordinary APM, which looked like he was randomly tapping on a keyboard. Under his control, Void Thunder Beast EX quickly rose into the air. Relying on the powerful thrusters under its feet, the mech could take off vertically without changing its posture. The maximum flying speed it could reach was Mach 2. Even when it had just taken off, it only took about 4 seconds to accelerate from 0 to Mach 1. Of course, these were all theoretical values. When it came to practical use, there would be a lot of problems, such as the problem of energy output. No matter what the mech did, it required energy. Although Void Thunder Beast EX's Super Arc Energy Furnace was an infinite energy source that combined the advantages of various technologies, the total output of this energy source within a certain period of time was limited. Not long ago, Brother Ju used the positron cannon, which was an attack that consumed a lot of energy. After using such an attack, the peak output of the energy furnace would decrease for a period of time, which would affect the mech's other performance. As a result, Void Thunderous Beast EX's ascent was slightly slower this time, and this little bit of time was enough for Sasaki Akira and Oda AI to land their attacks. Shing, shing, shing. Soon, Sasaki Akira's high-speed slashes landed on the mech's knees, making the sound of a circular saw cutting through metal. Oda AI took advantage of the situation to follow suit. Although she was a few seconds slower than her teammates, by the time she rushed to the front of the mech, she was almost at the same level as Sasaki Akira. Iato Katana. Oda AI's attack was even fiercer. Her first attack was a horizontal slash that could split the sky and the earth. She wanted to cut Void Thunder Beast EX in half. Crack! Immediately afterward, a strange sound was heard. The lower half of Void Thunder Beast EX's body really was severed from its upper body. Chapter 1366. When Oda AI saw the mech split into two, she didn't look pleased with her attack. Instead, she looked puzzled. For an expert like her, even if everything happened in a fleeting moment, she was very sure that the separated mecha was not cut by her katana. Instead, it was cut off on its own. Ka. Just as she was thinking, a few more strange noises came one after another. At that moment, the Void Thunder Beast EX seemed to have disintegrated into 6 parts: the head, the torso, the left arm, the left leg, and the right leg. After each part was separated, it relied on its own propelling device to maintain high-speed movement. The next second, Feng Bujue's wild laughter came from the torso part of the mech. Ha ha ha. Too naive. My body is equipped with the Dragon Rider system. Full name: Disconnected Rapid Instrument Group Overlook Operation Network System, which is the Disconnected Integrated High-Speed Mobile Vehicle Group Network System. The Dragon Rider System. Unexpectedly, Sasaki's gloomy voice sounded. Oh, that's easy to deal with. After that, he made another move. It was a high-speed slash that pursued pure speed, and the target was the right leg of the Void Thunder Beast EX. TSK? What a troublesome fellow. When Feng Bujue saw Sasaki's action, he understood that his opponent knew the weakness of the Dragon Rider system. So he simply gave up on the leg and controlled the torso to escape. Sure enough, in less than 2 seconds, Akira Sasaki's attack hit the thruster of Void Thunder Beast EX's right leg, causing it to come to a halt. Seeing this, Oda AI took the opportunity to attack as well. With 2 clean slashes, she chopped the right leg into 4 parts, causing it to explode in flames. The weakness of the Dragon Rider system is that the system itself doesn't have the ability to dodge attacks. In the absence of targeted operations, the separated parts will only make irregular high-speed movements to reduce the possibility of being targeted and destroyed by the enemy. As Sasaki spoke, he rushed toward the left leg of the Void Thunder Beast EX. Feng Bujue, no matter how fast you think and how fast your hands are, as long as the medium of operation remains on the physical level, there is a limit to your reaction speed. Even if controlling 6 parts at the same time isn't a burden for you, the machine is not your hands and feet. Once it comes down to speed, there is no way you can avoid it. Bang! By the time he finished speaking, he had already used another high-speed dash to stop the left leg of Void Thunder Beast EX. Oda AI also followed up with her familiar movements and used her bold and unrestrained slash to chop off the left leg of Void Thunder Beast EX. At the same time, a bigger threat had arrived. Due to the separation of the body, the bullet attack was weakened. Hyang-Shin, who descended from the sky, used a few steps to change direction in the air and successfully weave through the bullet attack. He got close to the torso that Brother Ju was on. It's over. Hyang-Shin showed a determined expression this time. This meant that at this distance, he was confident that he would not miss. However, at this moment, I told you, you are too naive. Feng Bujue's sinister voice sounded again. Then, a blue light suddenly appeared around them. In the blink of an eye, the scattered parts of Void Thunder Beast EX, including the remains of the two parts that had been destroyed, all of them suddenly disappeared. What the hell? Hyang-Shin stopped in shock and landed on the ground again. Oda AI and Sasaki Akira were also surprised, not knowing what had happened. Feng Bujue, on the other hand, piloted the intact Void Thunder Beast EX and appeared at the position where he was standing 30 seconds ago, right after he fired the positron cannon. Obviously, in addition to the Dragonite system, he had other means, more powerful means. The reverse time flashback system, created by Dr. Yongheng, was an extremely dangerous system that used time magic as its driving force. In their own universe, the use of such magic was forbidden under most circumstances. However, as mentioned before, the Void Thunder Beast EX was going to be given to Brother Ju so that he could take it to another universe. Therefore, the bigwigs of the U-Super Alliance didn't mind installing these black technologies that were usually inconvenient for them to use. Attack the torso! After a moment, Sasaki Akira, who had calmed down, made a very accurate judgment again and gave instructions to his teammates and Hyang-Shin. Even though Hyang-Shin wasn't someone who would take orders from others, in order to defeat this strange device provided by the Outlander, he had no choice but to ask for help from the Sengoku duo, who were also Outlanders. Therefore, this time, the three of them worked together and attacked the torso of the Void Thunder Beast EX from 3 different directions. So, you finally figured out that you should directly attack the energy furnace and the pilot. Feng Bujue, who was inside the cockpit, jumped into the air, but he was as calm as ever. Unfortunately, I have many more fun weapon systems here. Warning, your mechanical suit's lifespan is limited to 30 seconds. Just as Brother Ju was feeling smug, the system announcement that came out of nowhere was like a punch to his stomach, causing his expression to shift. What the F***CK? Feng Bujue cursed as his mind raced like lightning. About 2 seconds later, he figured out what was going on. He muttered to himself, I can only use it for 6 minutes, Yes, Void Thunder Beast EX could only be used for 6 minutes each time it appeared. Furthermore, it could only appear once every time a player queued up in a scenario. Since this mechanical suit was a special item stored in the hero ID card of Pokerman, it didn't have a detailed description like other normal items. This was also the case for the Chuck Norris series items, just _we, and the Tian Gang D Sha box. It was because of this that Feng Bujue didn't realize how powerful this mechanical suit was until he summoned it. If Brother Ju had known about this mechanical suit's combat power and its lifespan, his strategy might have been different. It took me 40 seconds to kill Lung Yuchio. It took me 1 minute and 30 seconds to familiarize myself with the weapon system. It took me about 40 seconds to fly here from the outskirts of town. Then, I fought with them for 2 minutes. Feng Bujue calculated the time in his mind. At least I got some useful information. The next time I use it, I can calculate the time. But the situation now is not good. While Feng Bujue was thinking, the attacks of the 3 men had arrived. The surrounded Void Thunder Beast EX still had a weapon to counter them. It used an indiscriminate sonic attack with a mechanical suit as the center, the Howling Cannon, to force the 3 men back. Your mechanical suit's lifespan has 20 seconds left. The system announcement was like a reminder, reminding Feng Bujue of the impending danger. It's impossible to kill all three of them in 20 seconds. Brother Ju was busy trying to come up with a solution. After 20 seconds, the mechanical suit will disappear and I'll have to fight personally. Things are different now. My equipment and skills are almost all gone. Without the body enhancement spell modified, I might be killed instantly. Looking at it now, Feng Bujue's strategy of using the mechanical suit to play Peerless was not so wise. If Void Thunder Beast EX did not have a time limit, he would have no problem doing so. With the advantage of unlimited energy, once the battle dragged into a tug of war, even if he could not kill all of his enemies, he could still kill them all before the mechanical suit was destroyed. However, as the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes. Halfway through the battle, Brother Ju realized that the mechanical suit could only be used for 6 minutes at a time. This put him in an extremely disadvantageous situation. Of course, he had not reached the stage of terminating life yet. If he really couldn't do it, he still had Descent of the War Demon and Chuck Norris's Razor. With these two ultimate moves, it was more than enough to kill the 3 men in front of him. But the risk of using these 2 skills was equal to the reward. Once the skill's duration was over, Feng Bujue would basically be a half-dead man, and the remaining opponents that he had not dealt with would have to be dealt with by Ruo Yu alone. Speaking of Ruo Yu, she had already made her move. Although she was very confident in Feng Bujue, and thought that since he came out to play Peerless in such a high-profile manner, he must have at least 90% confidence. However, after observing for a while, perhaps it was her intuition, or perhaps it was something else, she vaguely felt that there was something strange behind Brother Ju's relaxed and arrogant attitude. This was something that even the 3 men who were besieging Brother Ju did not notice. However, Ruo Yu noticed it. She rushed over as fast as she could, wanting to help Brother Ju out of this predicament. Unexpectedly, "Please wait." Suddenly, a loud shout came from the side. It was like a tidal wave. Along with the shout came a sword move. Myriad Guiding Heavenly Pivot Sword was one of Blade Runner's trump cards. There was no test, and there was no need to hold back. Facing an opponent like Ruo Yu, Child Jian used his strongest move. At the same second, from the other side of Child Jian, a figure also charged at him. Not a scaredy cat, was holding a strange-looking golden weapon. One end of it was a flat hook shaped like a crescent moon, and the other end was a full sphere shaped like a full moon. At that moment, Not a Scaredy Cat swung the end of the full moon and used Tacit Attack, fake, to attack Ruo Yu's blind spot. Facing this sudden pincer attack, Ruo Yu used both swords at the same time and used 2 completely different sword skills. Xian Yuan's sword was a heavy sword, and it used Demonic Flow Sword, which was wild and reckless. Primal Water Sword was a light sword, and it used Wind's Mark, which was calm and easy. Using the heavy sword as an attack was Child Jian's ultimate move. Using the light sword to reduce the force, he avoided the sharp edge of the sword. In the whole of Thriller Paradise, there were probably only a handful of people who could use this kind of fighting style to block the combined attack of 2 super first-rate players. Ruo Yu was one of them, but at that moment, she was unable to unleash her full potential. Due to her eagerness to provide support, Ruo Yu's attention had been placed on Feng Bujue's killing circle, which caused her to lower her guard around herself. This level of carelessness was fine under normal circumstances, but when facing players like Blade Runner and Not a Scaredy Cat, it was a problem. The battle between top players did not allow for the slightest hesitation or distraction. The slightest mistake was the difference between victory and defeat. Ruo Yu's reaction was one step too slow, and that small difference brought about a devastating result. Bang! The heavy sword was one step too slow, and the power of the clash was not at its maximum. Therefore, the sword in Ruo Yu's right hand was deflected away. TSK. The light sword was one step too slow, and the skill of reducing the force could not be used fully. The opponent's attack would not be able to follow her will. Therefore, the effect of the sword in Ruo Yu's left hand was greatly reduced as well. In the end, Blade Runner's sword slashed through Ruo Yu's shoulder and landed on her right collarbone. Even though Not a Scaredy Cat skill did not hit the target, most of the force landed on Ruo Yu's left waist. The attack landed, and Ruo Yu was sent flying. She looked like she had been hit by a train. Her body flew across the street and slammed heavily into a pillar that was as thick as a tree trunk. Even so, she did not lose her momentum. After her body fell to the ground, she continued to roll on the ground for a long distance before she stopped. Obviously, this round of attack had taken a lot of damage, so much so that she had lost control of her body for a period of time. She could not even adjust her posture in midair. Originally, Ruo Yu would have died the moment she was hit. If Blade Runner's sword had slashed down a bit more and tore open her lungs, then she would have been done for. Thankfully, the huge impact from Not a Scaredy Cat's tacit attack, fake, sent Ruo Yu flying, and Chao Jian's attack did not reach its target. Gulp! Ha! Ha! Lying on the ground, Ruo Yu's clothes were dyed red with blood. She could not tell which blood came from her mouth and which came from her wound. She used a lot of energy to get her lungs to breathe again, but breathing made the pain become clearer. On the other hand, Ruo Yu's consciousness and vision became blurry. She didn't die even after that. That's amazing. Soon, Not a Scaredy Cat appeared before Ruo Yu. I'm sorry, but this is a killing game. Chao Jian appeared as well, and when he spoke, he raised the sword in his hand. It had to be admitted that their ambush was very successful. The two had not wasted their time waiting in the dark. As outsiders, these two naturally did not know that Feng Bujua's data had been cleared, and they did not know that Void Thunder Beast EX had a time limit. Therefore, from their perspective, the two from Underworld Frontline were the strongest existences in the scenario. While they were fighting on their own, taking down one of them was undoubtedly the best plan. The sword fell. Ruo Yu had not stood up. At that moment, her snow-white face and black hair were stained with the blood and dirt on the ground. Her injuries had reached a level where she could not heal on her own. She had never been in such a sorry state before. Even if she had been killed more than once in the scenario, this was the first time she had been ambushed because of her own mistake. I've changed. At the moment before death, Ruo Yu was thinking about something else. When did it start? When I met him? Or even earlier, half a year ago, on the night of the 19th of June. Feng Bujue sneakily followed Ruo Yu to the latter's home. Ruo Yu acted like nothing was wrong. She opened the door calmly and led her brother Ju upstairs to her room. Are you going to give it to me now? After Feng Bujue entered the room, he appeared rather nervous. He was rarely nervous, and it was even rarer for him to show this kind of unconcealable nervousness. Yes, it's getting late. You'd better take it and go home, Ruo Yu replied in a normal tone. When Feng Bujue heard that, he gulped. He could not help but think about what Ruo Yu had said earlier. Technically speaking, it's yours. I've been keeping it safe for you for many years, and I think it's time to give it to you. Well, it's not that I suddenly remembered it. I wanted to give it to you for many years, but I never had the chance. When I first met you in Thriller Paradise, I had the urge to give it to you directly, but after some hesitation, I delayed it until now. No matter how you think about it, it's more like that, Feng Bujue thought to himself. To be honest, I'm a bit embarrassed that she took the initiative to give it to me. Just as his mind was wandering, Ruo Yu slowly took out something from her bedside table. Then, she walked to Brother Ju and handed it to him. Here. When Ruo Yu said that word, Brother Ju instinctively froze. 2 seconds later, he recovered and looked at the thing in his hand. You wanted to give me this? Yes. Ruo Yu nodded. It was rare for her to blush like she had done something embarrassing. Feng Bujue studied the thing in his hand. It was an exercise book. It was the kind of exercise book that he used when he was still a primary school student. The book was not thick, and it looked quite old. There were 2 words written on the cover of the book, God of Swords. Brother Ju immediately recognized the handwriting of the 2 words. It was his own handwriting, and he immediately understood the origin of this exercise book. Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. When I was 10 years old, I had already completed my debut short story, God of Swords. That was what Feng Bujue had told Ambitionist, Autumn Breeze, and Weighty Words at the Detective Club. Even though from a perspective of the situation at the time, it sounded like he was joking, in reality, he was telling the truth. The God of Swords was his first real novel. The story was not long, and it was just enough to fill up an exercise book. The plot was not very complicated, and it described the process of how a fledgling swordsman grew into the God of Swords who looked down on the world. However, since it was written by Feng Bujue, even though he was only 10 years old at the time, the setting of the story would naturally have some highlights. The most unexpected setting of God of Swords was that the cold and surly main character he described was actually a female swordsman who dressed up as a man from the beginning to the end. He left a lot of foreshadowing in the story, but he did not explain the reasons behind the various abnormalities. It was only at the end that the truth was revealed. Of course, no one could comment on whether the story was good or bad. This was because Brother Ju wrote it out of interest. After he finished writing it, he looked at it again and felt that there were many flaws in it. He also saw how childish he was. After that, he put this exercise book together with some old books at home. He did not know when it was sold to a collector. Feng Bujue would never have thought that he would see God of Swords again at this time and place under such circumstances. He flipped open the exercise book and looked at the densely packed words that he had written one by one. He did not know what to feel. "Where did you get this?" Feng Bujue asked as he flipped through the pages. "When I was young, I passed by an old bookstall and accidentally saw it. I flipped through it and bought it for a few dollars," Ruoyu replied. "How did you know it was me who wrote this?" The reason Feng Bujue asked that was because he did not write his name on the book. "When I grew up, I read so many of your books. Naturally, I knew," Ruoyu said. "Huh." Feng Bujue laughed. "From the marks on this exercise book, it seems like you have read it many times. When I was young, I didn't have many friends." Ruoyu leaned on the bed and replied thoughtfully. "Other than Shaoling, no one else played with me. I didn't have anyone my age that I could talk to." As she spoke, she looked at the exercise book in Brother Ju's hand. "When I read 1 or 2 pages of that exercise book, I knew that it was written by a child about my age. At that time, I thought that since I was not good at communicating with people face to face, maybe I could understand the thoughts of people my age through words." "And the result?" Brother Ju closed the exercise book and asked. "Huh." Ruoyu laughed bitterly. "I seem to have opened something that I shouldn't have opened. No wonder when I first met you, there was a sense of déjà vu, a feeling that I could not quite put my finger on," Feng Bujue said. "Sigh." Ruoyu sighed. "It's all because I was too young. I was unknowingly influenced by you. If I could go back to the moment when we first met, I think I should tell you." Feng Bujue revealed a warm smile. "I once read a book. You are very much like the person in the book. Then I will also tell you." Ruoyu smiled. "I once read a book, but accidentally. I became the person in the book. Which one is the real me? Is it the me before I read that book? Is it the me before I met him? Or is it the me now? Is it because I'm sealed that I've lost myself? The obsession, the concern, is it my heart? Or is it just me telling myself what I should do? Are my feelings real or an illusion? Am I mimicking something? Chasing after some kind of illusion in my heart? Thoughts could transcend time, and an instant could become eternity." At the moment before death, Ruoyu thought about many things, and it felt like she had been thinking for a very, very long time. However, death still came in the end. Blade Runner's last hit was precise, and it slit Ruoyu's throat. After Ruoyu, who did not have much life points left, was hit, she dissolved into white light. After the two from Jianghu succeeded, they turned their attention to the other side of the battlefield. By then, the time limit of Brother Ju's Void Thunder Beast EX was up. Like a normal summon creature, the mechanical suit morphed back into light and returned to the card in Feng Bujue's inventory. And just like that, Brother Ju was exposed to the encirclement of a scenario boss and 2 top players. "Looks like Brother Feng is not in a good situation," Blade Runner said. "But with his ability, he might not lose. There's no need to rush. After all, we've already dealt with passing rain," Not a Scaredy Cat said. "No matter how strong Feng Bujue is, sooner or later, he will show his weakness. Look, Teacher Chong's entire dream are still observing. We can wait. Just as they were talking, suddenly, "Heh, who did you say has been dealt with?" A voice that sounded like a hooligan came from behind Child Jian, and not a scaredy cat. Hearing that voice, the two sucked in a cold breath in unison. How is that possible? Not a scaredy cat whipped her head around and saw a face with disheveled hair and shrouded in shadow leaning toward her. The tips of their noses were almost touching. That hit just now was so painful. At this moment, Ruo Yu's tone of voice and her entire temperament had changed drastically. For some reason, her body had returned to the state it was before she was injured. She was as unharmed as when she first entered the scenario. Even her clothes were clean, and her sword was back in its scabbard. This time, it's my turn. When Ruo Yu spoke, her left hand had already wrapped around Not a Scaredy Cat's neck. Not a Scaredy Cat, who was famous for her insane strength among female players, was unable to struggle free. 1 second later, there was a crunch, and Not a Scaredy Cat's neck was snapped by Ruo Yu with a single hand. This series of unforeseen events had occurred too quickly, and young Master Jian had barely recovered from a shock when his companions had instantly lost their lives. He immediately shouted out explosively as he swung his sword and fiercely slashed Deng. This time, Ruo Yu's sword appeared in front of Blade Runner's attack trajectory and blocked the man's full-powered attack. You seem to know quite a bit about swordsmanship. Ruo Yu's usual icy presence had been replaced by a coldness that was tinged with mockery. Then, I'll spar with you a few more times to make you happy. As she said that, she raised her left hand and touched the tip of her sword. Instantly, the blade was enveloped in a demonic flame, and the Xianyuan sword appeared to be a demonic sword. In the blink of an eye, Ruo Yu had already unleashed 10 moves. Each move was dangerous, and each move was fatal. Be it in terms of strength, speed, or skill, Flash's of sword was at a disadvantage. In that short exchange of blows, he did not feel like he was fighting a player but the manifestation of some kind of berserk sword aura. Are you done with your warm-up? After a round of continuous slashes, Ruo Yu was calm and composed. She had a frightening smile on her face. The truly interesting part is about to begin. After she finished speaking, she flipped her left hand, and the Origin Water divine sword appeared. Another type of sword art was also displayed. Chapter 1367. Xianyuan Demonic Flow, Origin Water Wind. A peerless swordsman, 2 completely different sword techniques. Under the continuous barrage of attacks, Blade Runner was instantly at a disadvantage. Just now, I had already begun to disappear in the light. Just what is happening? Child Jian was not weak, but in front of Ruo Yu, he could only defend himself. From his perspective, it was as if he was being attacked by 2 swordsmen at the same time. And this pressure was even greater than fighting 1 against 2. The traces of the sword have not been seen. The shadows of the sword are sparse. Between the moves, Ruo Yu was still casually mocking her opponent. One of the laughing blade and sword. Is your strength only at this level? Blade Runner knew that his opponent was provoking him, wanting him to take out his trump card. But he did not mind doing so, because he was already forced into a desperate situation. You want to see my ultimate move, don't you? Young Master Jin shouted loudly as he faced the attack. All right, I'll fulfill your wish. As his voice fell, an ultimate move appeared. Blade Runner could be seen gathering his inner yuan, concentrating it on his sword. In an instant, a red light shot out from his sword, causing the wind and clouds to change color. Blood stains the pugilistic world. Child Jian's shout came together with his sword. Blood stains the pugilistic world had a power that shocked the heavens. Its changes were strange. 1 move becoming 10,000 moves, and 10,000 moves becoming 1 move. Ruo Yu, seeing this, had a smile on her lips, but her eyes were cold. She was like an excited gambler who, after seeing her opponent's trump card, suddenly lost interest in the bet. Not bad, Ruo Yu said this, but her tone seemed to be expressing the words only at this level. Then I'll also give you a quick death. As she spoke, her two swords moved together, the two flows becoming one. A remnant wind sword shadow, demonic sword berserk flow was released. The black and white energies of the Xianyuan sword and the origin water sword merged into a supreme sword aura, instantly shattering Blade Runner's red sword aura. The remaining force of that ultimate move landed on Child Jin's body. At this point, the outcome of the battle was clear. When their figures passed each other, Ruoyu didn't even turn around to look at her opponent. She walked towards the other killing formation where Feng Bujua was. As for Blade Runner, he could only fall and swallow the bitter fruit of defeat. Feng Bujua. 2 seconds later, Ruoyu, who was moving forward quickly, shouted. Not only Brother Ju, who was using Jeppo to escape into the sky, but even the 3 people who were chasing after Brother Ju, as well as the other players and NPCs in the area, were attracted by her. War Demon descends. Ruoyu didn't speak much nonsense and immediately reported these 4 words. Brother Ju naturally understood what she meant. Even if she didn't say it, Brother Ju was almost ready to activate this title skill. It's a bit strange. Before Feng Bujua activated the skill, he was thinking about something else. What's with this domineering female CEO feeling? He didn't have time to think too much. Seeing that the enemies were closing in on him faster than him, he quickly activated War Demon Descends. In an instant, the devil flame appeared in the air, and the devil aura filled the sky. Feng Bujue, who was surrounded by devil Do Chi, tore apart the burst of black flames, took a step in the air, and disappeared from everyone's sight. So fast. At this moment, Oda AI and Sasaki Akira exclaimed at the same time. In the next second, Brother Ju's figure reappeared and stood beside Ruoyu. What's the situation? He didn't waste time and asked a very efficient question. Do you still remember my special skill that has a mysterious trigger mechanism? Ruoyu continued. Phoenix dies, Phoenix regenerates? Feng Bujue answered almost without thinking. Yes, Ruoyu said, although I still haven't figured out the trigger mechanism. Judging from the current situation, I was able to come back to life because of this skill. The skill that the two of them were talking about was already learned by Ruoyu during the super-dimensional melee. However, the description of this skill was also in the style of the Heaven and Earth inversion mantra. There were only 2 lines of words. Phoenix blood stains the dust. Phoenix regenerates illusion. In fact, until now, Ruoyu still didn't know the specific effect of this skill. She only saw that this skill had entered the cooldown state from the skill bar and deduced that her resurrection from death with full health and all the basic abilities, strength, speed, maximum energy each time, etc., increased by more than 50% was caused by this skill. Of course, after her resurrection, she activated the second stage of Soul's Eye, maximum efficiency and limited burst. That was why she was able to kill Blade Runner and not a scaredy cat so easily. Then, how long can you maintain this state? Brother Ju asked again. I don't know. Ruoyu said, maybe it's similar to your descent of the War Demon. After a while, there will be some side effects, so at this point, there was no need to continue the conversation. The rest of the content was understood tacitly. Coincidentally, Hyang Shinji and Sengoku arrived at this time. To use a more vulgar analogy, the 3 of them were like 3 sexy girls in revealing clothes rushing towards 2 brawny men who had just taken Viagra. This was called running into the muzzle of a gun. Fengli didn't need to say anything to know what skill to use. Brother Ju activated the demonic Psycho Poker with one hand. The demonic Psycho Poker cards gathered together to form a blade, and the power of the War Demon burned like a flame. Ruoyu only swung her 2 swords, and the sword energy, demonic energy, and murderous energy gushed out like the stars in the sky. At this moment, at a high point far away from the battlefield, Su Huaishang, who had just worked together with Feng Jin to kill Hyang Shinji, recognized this skill. She mumbled, "Is this the demonic flash slash?" Indeed, the basic pattern of this combo attack had not changed, but the effect of the skill, due to the growth and changes of the 2 users, it was no longer the same as before. This skill was no longer the demonic flash slash. The new skill given by the system was called Demonic Mastery Senro. And the first people to run into this new combo skill were Oda AI and Sasaki Akira. In an instant, the demonic skill appeared. The two people who were charging at them felt the space around them suddenly change. It was as if time and space were covered by a layer of gray shadow, and their movements slowed down due to this change. What's going on? Oda AI was still in shock when her neck was suddenly cut open. Then, her head separated from her body and flew into the air. The cut surface of the wound was very smooth, and not a single drop of blood flowed out. What came out from the wound was a mass of black, gaseous black shadow. How? Sasaki Akira didn't even get to finish his sentence before he was cut into several pieces. His severed limbs were the same as his teammates, with black substance seeping out from the wound. This scene was incomparably strange. If one had to describe it, it would be like using a high-speed camera to take a picture of an ink painting that was slowly changing. In the almost monochrome scene, the two people's bodies were cut in half, and the ink-like substance slowly dyed their bodies, disappearing from the scene. After an unknown amount of time, the spectators finally recovered from this illusory scene. By then, Oda AI and Sasaki Akira had both collapsed to the ground. Only silence remained, witnessing the end of them being turned into white light. That was so close. Several seconds later, Hyang-Shin's voice rang out again. Who would have thought? There are monsters like you too in this world. Yes, he was still alive. He had dodged the positron cannon, passed through the barrage of bullets, survived the whistling cannon. Earlier, when he was one step away from the effective range of Demonic Mastery Senro, he had stopped in time. Hyang-Shin had managed to escape and scathe time and time again from attacks that could have killed or heavily injured a scenario boss. This was obviously not something that could be explained by coincidence. I see. I think I know your secret now. Feng Bujue, who finished casting the skill, turned to look at Hyang-Shin. I can see that as well. 1 second later, Ruo Yu, who stood beside Brother Ju, said in a manlier tone than Brother Ju, "This man can see death, can he?" The death that she mentioned was not a state, and it was not the term that they were familiar with. It was an abstract concept that had been materialized. For example, if a normal person stood at the edge of the rooftop of a building and looked down, they would see the street. If Hyang-Shin stood at the same place and looked down, other than the street, he would see an invisible, shadow-like substance, and the range of this substance was just right at the spot where he would fall to his death if he stepped out of it. That was the death that had been materialized. It could also be seen as the realm of death that has a high chance of death once touched. For Hyang-Shin, as long as he did not come into contact with that substance and did not step into the realm of death, he would be safe. The reason why he was able to live until today and become an almost invincible swordsman was because of his ability to see death. Ha! I thought no one would ever be able to see through my secret. Hyang-Shinji was calm. He sneered and replied, "That's right. I can see the body of death before it approaches. All these years, I've relied on this ability to walk on the edge of life and death countless times. I've tempered my martial arts to this invincible realm. Whether you are invincible or not depends on whether you survive or not." Feng Bujue did not plan to let Hyang-Shin finish his sentence. After he took a breath, he immediately went for the kill again and used the Tempest Kick combo from mid-range. Not to mention how long Ruo Yu's skill could last, Brother Ju's Descent of the War Demon only lasted for 3 minutes. Once the time limit was up, he would enter a semi-disabled state, so he could not afford to waste any more time. If it was not for the fact that the combo gave him a feeling of exhaustion, he would not even waste the time to catch his breath. Humph, you seem to be in a hurry. Who would have thought that Hyang-Shinji would start to run and use his amazing Qigong to fight with Brother Ju? This was a trick that Feng Bujue used to rely on body enhancement spell modification, but this time, someone else used it on him. Don't think that you are the only one who can see through your opponent, Hyang-Shin said as he ran. I can also see that the martial arts you are using are beyond your limits. As long as I delay you for a while, you will all die. It had to be said that this boss was very difficult to deal with. Just the ability to adapt to circumstances was something that many big shots in the main universe could learn from. The tactic that Yangshin used this time was correct, and in fact, it was already effective. At that moment, only Feng Bujue rushed forward, and Ruo Yu did not follow. The reason was that the magic conjuration of Senro earlier was too draining. Even Brother Ju, who had unlimited stamina and spirit energy in his war demon state, had to take a short break after using the skill, so one could imagine Ruo Yu's condition. Actually, when the skill ended, Ruo Yu could barely stand, but she was afraid that if she fell, she would attract the attention of other players or become a burden to Brother Ju. So she gritted her teeth and held on. Bujue. After a while, Ruo Yu finally lost her strength. She knelt on one knee and said with difficulty, "I am afraid this is the end, right?" She ended the battle with an apology, and this time, she really turned into a white light and left the scenario. Phoenix Death, Phoenix Life was a skill that allowed players to temporarily revive and increase their combat power. It was similar to a final burst of energy before death. Once the skill's energy ran out, the player would still die. The change in her personality had nothing to do with the skill's effect. It was just an accident. First, Phoenix Death, Phoenix Life was a heavy burden on the player's mind. Coincidentally, Ruo Yu's Souls was also a skill that required a lot of mental power. With the combination of the two, the excessive burden had destroyed a barrier in Ruo Yu's mental world. It caused a crack to appear in her seal, and that affected her personality. The emotions that had been suppressed for decades, even if they were to show even the slightest bit, could be strong and dangerous. Of course, as for how strong and dangerous it was, Brother Ju would have to wait until he returned to the real world to experience it. Looking at the current situation, the battle between Feng Bujue and Hyang Shinji had entered a rhythm that was extremely disadvantageous for the former. There was not much time left for descent of the war demon, but Brother Ju, who was lacking in skills, could not rely on his two skills and physical power to deal with the retreating Hyang Shinji. Even without Hyang's death wish ability, with his caution and cunning, it was more than enough to deal with the current Feng Bujue. It's over. Something bad is going to happen. Seeing the time ticking away, Brother Ju's attention was diverted elsewhere. Weary Dreams, Teacher Chu, and Su Huaishang, there's still 3 players around us. He used the data view to scan the situation around them. If I'm not mistaken, they should be the only opponents left, but I have no time to deal with them now. Naturally, the 3 players had seen through this as well. They silently moved closer to Brother Ju and Hyang, ready to deal the finishing blow. I'm dead for sure once the skill ends. Feng Bujue said, "There's nothing I can do. In the last 10 seconds, I need to open up some distance and use Chuck Norris's razor." Just as he was thinking about this, his eyes accidentally caught something. It was a shadow that was still very far away from him. The person was leading a white horse, and they were slowly approaching from the direction of the town entrance. From other people's perspective, there was nothing special about the person, but the moment Feng Bujue saw her through the data view, he knew the appearance of this person would change everything. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.